not only am I chosen by the gods and aliens to overthrow the Illuminati, but I'm psychic, bitch. I worked with my psychiatrist. I slowly weaned off them. I waited till I was like really confident that I was ready. Eventually, I got off the pills, but I don't think it was because the pills cured me. Like life cured me.
Nick, welcome to Leo Listens, probably the best psychosis podcast. Still not decided on the name.
Leo listens. I like it.
Yeah.
Reminds me of Frasier. You ever watch Frasier?
I've seen a couple episodes.
Yeah. He's a radio show host, psychologist, and when people call in, he says, "Thanks for calling in. I'm listening."
I'm actually studying psychology too, so maybe I'm the reincarnation of the TV sitcom Frasier. Class. Yeah, Nick, can you tell us, please, what were you diagnosed with and how many years ago was it?
Yeah, I got diagnosed with drug-induced psychosis. How many years ago was that? I guess 15 years ago. So I was 17 years old.
Wow, 17. It's quite a young age to be diagnosed with that, isn't it?
I think it's kind of typical. It's usually like late teens, early 20s that people develop it, don't they?
Yeah. You're actually the first person I've met who's been diagnosed with under 18.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was 25.
Oh, okay, wow.
What symptoms did you experience for your drug-induced psychosis?
So the worst one was extreme paranoia, and the other symptoms were hearing voices and having a sort of blur of the lines between my internal and external experience. So like my thoughts, emotions, if there's music stuck in my head, like anything that was happening that normally you can really easily tell, like that's an internal experience, that got totally blurred with my external experience. Like, oh, here's the room I'm in and the stuff I can see, right? That all got just kind of blurred together. And so it became very hard for me to tell like what was an internal thought and what was an external thing happening that other people could also experience. So I think there's a special word for that, but I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, like struggling to find what's real and
I think I've read it's a common psychotic symptom, but I can't remember the exact name for it.
Yeah, I can't remember the name for it either. Your experiences are the most similar to mine that I have met out of anyone else that I've talked to with psychosis.
Well, that's cool. Psychosis brothers.
Yeah, bro. And it did give me a lot of comfort whenever we had our phone call and you told me about your experiences, and I was like, I could relate to it a lot.
Nice.
So I want to dive a little bit deeper into your symptoms before
Sure.
we go into your past, as I'm sure you're of the same belief as of me here that the symptoms don't explain the psychosis. It's like the trauma and the early life experiences and the environment that you go through that causes the psychosis.
Yeah.
But your delusional paranoia, what sort of stories did you create in your head there?
Yeah, so it kind of evolved over about a year. It started with it started with not like psychosis at all. So we were just chatting before this about that I got really into conspiracy theories. So there was a while where I was really under the impression that by the time I'd grown up and graduated college and entered like the real adult world, that there wouldn't be a world to live in. Like World War III was going to happen, climate change was going to happen, like the Illuminati was going to conspire to lower the world population down to 500 million. And so I just thought, wow, what's the point in me doing anything, studying to go to school? Like I just had no motivation to work for a future because I thought the future wouldn't exist. But part of me thought, well, I guess the future, I could create the future. I could try to start like a revolution or some kind of movement to unseat the Illuminati from power, or unseat the, you know, corporations that are polluting the earth. And, like half of this wasn't even conspiracy theories. It was just on the news. The news would say, by the year 2020, the world's going to be just completely destroyed by climate change, and like that was just something that all the adults seem to just believe, and so I was like, well, why aren't we doing anything about it? And so I thought, well, since nobody's doing anything about it, or not, whatever they're doing is not working, we obviously need a giant communist revolution where we murder all the rich people and all the heads of all the governments and corporations and install a communist dictatorship that rules the whole world, that controls the carbon emissions and doesn't allow the Illuminati to do things. So that was kind of the only solution I could think of. I was like, since nothing anybody's just doing is working, obviously I gotta just become the dictator of the world. I didn't use the word dictator at the time, but the well-intentioned, benevolent king of the world, I suppose. But obviously, I thought that was impossible until basically I started it was kind of the end of grade 11. I was put on antidepressants, and so up to this point, I was like smoking a lot of weed and doing drugs and stuff, but I hadn't really had any like psychotic symptoms from it. I was just reading conspiracy theories and stuff, but it was really not any different than any of my other peers. But once I started the antidepressants, things started getting a little weirder with me, and the drugs started affecting me a little differently. So I don't like blame the antidepressants. I more blame that I was like mixing them with recreational drugs and everything. But I remember one time I was on ketamine, which is kind of the deliriant drug, and I'd recently gotten really obsessed with this band called The Doors, which is like a rock band from the 60s. Has this like very strange, you probably know, strange charismatic leader, Jim Morrison. And I was wearing a shirt with all their faces, all the guys in the band on it. I was looking in the mirror, and I was on ketamine, and I was like tripping out, and I'm seeing my face and I'm seeing his face, and they're starting to like mold together. And I'm like, wait, what if I'm the reincarnation of Jim Morrison? There's all these, he was like my idol, right? So I really wanted to see myself as like him, but all of a sudden I started seeing myself as exactly like him. And then I started thinking, wow, if I really believed that I was the continuation of this awesome, cool, psychedelic rock star, then I would have the confidence to think that I could, start a band and become famous and start a revolution and change the world. And so if I just make myself believe this, it doesn't even matter if it's true. If I make myself believe it, then I'll have that confidence. And that kind of tied in also with, I had this like incredible social anxiety all the time. So I also thought, well, maybe this will clear my social anxiety too. And so I started going to school on ketamine and just continually brainwashing myself to believe this story. And I'd feel invincible. Like all of a sudden, the social anxiety was totally gone. And what's really funny is now they're actually studying ketamine as a cure for phobias. So if you have a social phobia or arachnophobia or any phobia, they'll put you on ketamine and expose you to the phobia, and it actually does lower your anxiety and fear. And even once you come off the ketamine, that anxiety and fear is still very diminished towards that phobia. So it really kind of was working with that, but it was kind of tied in with this story that eventually morphed into what I think psychologists would call a delusion of grandeur, which is like one of the key features of psychosis often. And so all of a sudden, when I'm not on this drug, like I'm telling myself this story constantly, and it's almost become part of my anxiety. Like I have to believe this story, or I'm not going to be able to have the confidence to save the world, and the world's going to end, and I'm not going to have the confidence to talk to girls and to be at a high school party and not like feel social anxiety the whole time, like, so I just constantly like, if a doubt comes on my mind, like, what if I'm not the reincarnation of Jim Morrison? And then I have to like tamp it down with a million thoughts about how I am and all the reasons why. And I'd create these more and more elaborate stories like, oh, like maybe there's like aliens watching over me and they want to save the planet too, and they're guiding everything I'm doing. And maybe there's, gods and goddesses in some alternate dimension, and they're watching everything I'm doing and they're guiding everything. And I started, I heard one friend told me like, oh, like angels talk to us through clocks. So if you look at the clock and it says 11:11, then whatever you're thinking about, like the angels like affirming that you're on the right path or something. And so I started like always looking for 1111, and then it was 111, and then it was 222, and then it was 123, and then it was 321, and then it was every combination that I could possibly attach any meaning to. If the numbers, the 5 and a 2 are next to each other, it kind of made a heart, then that meant something. And every single number I could possibly look at meant something on the clock. And I would always be looking at it out of anxiety, seeing if I was on the right track to this mission I was on, or whether it was giving me information about a girl I liked, or what. It became about everything. And so but there was also this kind of flip side to it, where all of a sudden I had this huge like mojo, socially and sexually, and I'd always had like a lot of anxiety around both of those things as a teenager. And all of a sudden I had like mojo and confidence that I could go to parties and just feel invincible, and talk to any girl I want and approach anybody I wanted, and so that part was really cool. But then, yeah.
So that was on the ketamine that you felt this mojo, like the
No, yeah,
sexual
it became
appeal and
like
stuff,
kind of
yeah.
became like a steady thing. Well, also I had an experience on. So there was a kind of little break where. So this is very weird. So when I was in the summer between 11th and 12th grade, I did LSD for the first time. And as weird as it sounds, the LSD gave me a break from the psychosis that was beginning to develop. So this is all the beginning stages of the psychosis. So here at this point, the psychosis isn't even really uncomfortable. It's like weird. I've got a weird story going on, but I'm not like suffering a lot for it, other than this little mind game I have to constantly play to convince myself I'm this reincarnation of this person or whatever. Um, but anyway, so one night I take LSD for the first time, and I'm just by myself in my bedroom, and um, it kicks in, and I basically like laughed for like 10 hours straight or whatever, because I just started notice. I like actually could see how crazy I was, but it wasn't like a seeing like I was psychotic. It was a seeing like all the ways society had conditioned me, all the ways I'd been taught to think about things growing up, all the stuff that everybody valued. Like everything was just so hilarious, like the way we all thought about things, that like it looked like I was like living in an insane asylum. Like everybody was totally insane, and I couldn't believe it. And it was so funny how we all thought about things. And at the time I'd been taking classes at high school, at the time, but right before that I took a class on like anthropology and evolution and everything, and looking at all the bones of the monkeys and everything we evolved from. And on this trip I started like seeing myself and everybody I knew like as just a really smart monkey. And when you looked at things like we're all just monkeys with like a little overcomplicated minds, it just everything made so much more sense. Like, oh, we want food, we want sex, we want people to love us, we want shelter. Like we really have like all of our needs are like mostly just monkey needs. But then we overcomplicate everything, like the way we get them, and advertising and everything just manipulates all those little needs to convince us like, oh, we need to buy this brand or do this or whatever, to meet that need. But meeting that need is so simple if you just skip over the conditioning. um, Anyways, so I laughed for a long time, and undid just a whole
Well,
lot of conditioning that I've been given around like who I was, or what I was supposed to look like, or how I was supposed to be. And I just came out of it with this like confidence and self-acceptance, and all this stuff that I'd like never felt before. And really had just an amazing summer, just a lot of it from that. But what was really interesting was when I came out of that experience, I went down to eat breakfast because I stayed up all night on the LSD. And I'm sitting there, I'm eating Fruit Loops because I just been craving Fruit Loops all night because I was a monkey all night, and I wanted something fruity all night. And so finally I was like, okay, I think the sun's been up long enough. My parents won't get suspicious if they find me eating Fruit Loops now. So I go downstairs to eat Fruit Loops, and my mom comes down, and I guess it must have been like 7 a.m. And so she knew it was unusual in the summer for me to be up that early. And she thought like something was off, and she comes downstairs and she grabs my antidepressants from the cupboard and like slams them on the table in front of me. Like she knew I'd been doing drugs that night, or maybe she'd be hearing me laughing, or I don't know what it was, but she was like kind of forcefully putting them in front of me. And as soon as I saw them, I just got so angry at these antidepressants and the whole idea that I needed to be taking them. And I had no explanation for why. It just came up so suddenly. I like threw them across the room. And looking back, I kind of think so. If you look up Prozac, one of the side effects is psychosis. And I think I kind of instinctively knew that like
really?
there's, yeah. not for everybody, but some percentage of people develop psychosis from Prozac, right? And I think part of me instinctively knew that the kind of mental clarity I'd experienced that night and whatever the Prozac was doing was at odds with each other. And I wanted nothing to do with it anymore. Even I had no logical reason for that. But you might have heard one of the interviews I did recently with a guy who like studies the brain a lot, and he's got this kind of working on this new theory that actually serotonin is actually a cause of psychosis, if not the major cause of psychosis, is elevated serotonin. And this whole idea that we need to push serotonin on everybody for their mental health is like totally crazy. And what's interesting is actually LSD actually blocks one of your serotonin receptors, is how it works. Same with magic mushroom psilocybin, they block serotonin, whereas antidepressants elevate or attempt to elevate your serotonin. So kind of a strange thing there.
Wow, that's so interesting. I did a video recently on this guy called Stan Grof. Have you heard of him?
I've heard of him, but I don't remember anything about him.
Yeah, you'd love his work, man. So he's a qualified psychiatrist and psychotherapist, and he trained under Albert Hoffman. So he was one of the first people to work with LSD mixed with psychotherapy, and whenever it became illegal in Europe, he went over to the US to continue experimenting with it, and he was in Maryland University or something like that, and there was this woman who, like, she'd been involved in criminal gangs. She was the driver of armed robbery where they killed someone.
Wow.
She like had arms in her house, and she was in a psychosis. She was in a mental hospital for a year, and like the psychiatrists were like, "Here, Stan, take her. Like, try your LSD shit with her."
Right.
And he was like, "Nah, man. Like, that will bring such bad press to this drug. Like, I've done so many such amazing things with it. I don't want to do it with this woman. I was like, it's fucking her up."
Yeah.
And eventually he got persuaded to do the test with her. And just like you said about how whenever you took LSD, you went out of your psychosis symptoms.
Well, just that one time, but yeah.
Just that one time. That happened for her as well. She was in a psychosis, and then whenever she took the LSD during the psychotherapy, she went back to normal. But then after the psychotherapy ended and the effects of the drug wore off, she went back into a psychosis, and she would like believe that she was creating this relationship with Stan Grof, like whenever they were away from each other, and then they come back to each other and she'd be normal.
Wow.
And yeah, it ended with like on the last psychotherapy session,
yeah,
her face just like morphed into this evil bodied spirit.
Wow.
And like her hand would become all deformed. And then this real deep voice came upon her.
Wow.
And said, "She is mine. You cannot take her from me."
No way.
Yeah, and Stan Grof says he just felt this like presence of like dark energy in the room. Like the devil was inside of her.
Oh my gosh.
And he used a technique that he got from Joseph Campbell. You know Joseph Campbell?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which was that he envisioned a white light coming out of her, because supposedly like evil spirits have always been afraid of a white light.
Right.
And he just like sat there and meditated for 2 hours, this white light coming out of her to try and get the fucking evil spirit to get the fuck away from there.
Yeah.
And it eventually worked. And
wow,
she managed to recover.
Wow.
Went on to like have a family and kids and never had a psychosis episode again.
That's amazing you say that, because so my wife Charity, we got married like 9 or 10 months ago, and we only met like a year ago, so we got married like real quick. So I've still been like kind of getting to know her family and everything. And the reason, so I just moved to Japan, and the reason we're here is because she was born and raised here, because her family was Christian missionaries here. And they've had some crazy stories about this. So they moved from America to Japan, like actually started with like her grandpa became a missionary here kind of by accident. That's a whole other story. But then her mom was born and raised here, and then her dad came from America. They became a missionary family here. And the Japanese are like extremely closed off to Christianity and basically all outside religions. Like they're like, oh, we're Buddhists, we're Shinto, like we have our own culture, like go away. But the one thing that they're open-minded about is that they believe Christians are the best at exorcisms. And so anytime they think somebody's possessed, they go looking for a Christian, right? And so they'll have all kinds of people who like are like, no, we don't want to have your religion, but my daughter's going crazy, so please come do an exorcism. And so Charity, growing up here and watching her parents do that, has like some really crazy stories that totally blew my mind. And I'm a total believer in like all kinds of supernatural stuff as being a possibility. So I'm never like closed minded, like, oh, that's not real. But I just never seen any like evidence that demonic possession was like really a thing, or maybe it happens, but it's like extremely rare or something. But some of her stories are just insane. So like they'll be like going to the house of like a girl who's never spoken a word of English in her life, is like extremely like small and feminine, but she has a demon in her. And as soon as these American Christians walk into the house, the demon sees them, knows they speak English, and starts speaking perfect English to them in a man's voice out of this small Japanese woman. And it'll say things
Wow.
exactly like what you just said, like "this woman belongs to me, you can't have her," like word for word what you said. And oh, what's another crazy? So one time when Charity was a kid, they go to this lady's house, and the mother was a witch, and so she, like, not like a witch like the Christians will say, like, oh, you're a witch because you practice another religion. Like, she's literally puts curses on people and stuff and works with demons and everything. And her daughter had somehow like absorbed one of these demons, I guess. And they go to their house, and I can't remember what their pretense was for being there, but the witch didn't know that they were Christians, and that was the only reason she invited them to their house. She would have invited them if she had known. But they were trying to go to the house because they saw that the girl was possessed, and they wanted to help her. So I guess maybe they went and were like, "Hey, we brought cookies because we're in the neighborhood," or just some sneaky thing to get in, so they could see what was going on with the daughter. And the daughter grabbed Charity when she was a kid too. They were both little kids, and pulled her into her bedroom and locked the door and put her hands on her head. And the little girl was trying to put the demon in her because she didn't want to be possessed anymore, even though the mother didn't even know she was possessed. Like like nobody had said anything about demonic possession. They just suspected she was possessed, and the first thing she did was grab Charity to try to put a demon in her. And Charity's like screaming, and Charity's mom like goes and like kicks the door open, and it's like, and sees what's happening and says, "Have you ever heard of Jesus Christ?" And the demon says in perfect English, again, a Japanese girl. Like, people do not speak good English in Japan. Like, I've been experiencing this. Even when they speak English, you can barely understand what they're saying. They have their whole own like little English dialect. But it says to her mom in perfect English, "Don't ever say the name Jesus around me. Keep that name out of your mouth," like in a man's voice again, right? And so um, somehow they like get Charity away from her, and the witch comes in and is like, "You didn't tell me you were Christians. Get out of my house." And as they're leaving, um, the mom says to the little girl, like, "Hey, I told you to wear nice clothes since we had company. Go change." And like Charity's mom and Charity are watching this, so they'll both tell you this. The little girl goes into the room, closes the door for literally not even 1 second. The door opens again, and she's completely changed her clothes. And then the mom says, "No, not that outfit, the other one." The door closes and opens again in like a split second, and the girl has a completely different outfit on. Like literal horror movie stuff. So, anyways, I guess the reason I tell you that story is I'd always kind of suspected, like, what if like a lot of mentally ill people are just possessed by demons? Like, maybe not all of them, but what if some of them are? Like, some of them really seem like that. Like when you walk, like I've been living in California the last like 8 years, and like so many homeless people on the street, like you would swear they were possessed, like the way they talk and act and everything. And according to Charity's family, like tons and tons of Japanese mentally ill people, like if you do like an exorcism on them, their mental illness goes away and they go live like a totally normal life. Pretty weird stuff.
Yeah, I've asked myself the same question, especially after reading that from Stan Groff, because there's a lot of his work that I do trust and like I respect him as a researcher. And you do notice it, especially like for some homeless people. Like, I was in Portugal like 6 months ago. I was walking through Lisbon, the capital, And there was a woman there who was just like shouting and singing and screaming and crying, and like without a doubt she is in some sort of psychosis, and she just had a crowd around her. Everyone was watching her, and I really wanted to approach her and help her, and I just did not know how to do it.
Right.
Yeah, and like, yeah, I sort of like, I try to shy away from the possibility of there being such thing as possessions. Like, just like you said, I'm open to the possibility that there is. However, I try to shy away from it, because if there is, it's outside of your control.
Yeah.
And like if my psychosis was in fact a possession, which it very well could have been, because it felt like I lost complete control of my thoughts. In fact, I did, with the intrusive thoughts that came in, and the intrusive visions.
Yeah.
And thinking and hearing and seeing things that you would never have imagined beforehand. It's for sure there's a possibility. However, like, by accepting that it was a possession, then it's a lot easier to like determine yourself as being like uncurable, unless you go to an exorcism person.
Yeah.
And I like to take responsibility for everything that comes into my life, and I find that that's one of the helpful things to help me recover.
Yeah.
Do you believe in it?
The demon thing or the personal thing?
The possession thing?
I don't believe that every case is. I mean, I don't even particularly believe that any case is 100%, but it seems like a total possibility that some are. But that's not the kind of thing you're allowed to research or talk about if you want to be a serious psychiatrist or psychologist, right?
That's also true. Yeah. And
I've studied a lot of Chinese medicine for the last like decade too, and definitely a lot of acupuncturists I've talked to. Well, not a lot, but some of them have been trained in sort of Chinese medicine style exorcisms too, where you use acupuncture and various kind of rituals and stuff to pull demons out of people. It's quite a bit quieter and less dramatic than a Christian exorcism, but supposedly gets the job done.
Are you learning about Chinese medicine for just your own interest, or are you also looking to add that into your business?
Well, my profession is teaching Qigong, which is kind of I feel like you said, like the part of Chinese medicine that you personally have the most control over. So Qigong is using breathing and movement and meditation and standing postures and visualization and these kind of tools that you can do kind of all within your own body to regulate your mind and emotions and health and everything. And so that would be considered a branch of Chinese medicine. So, but pretty much all of Chinese medicine follows the same philosophy that mostly stems out of a philosophy called Taoism, which was kind of a naturalist philosophy going back thousands of years in China. And a lot of it was about, there's nature outside and then there's nature inside, and how do we kind of relate and harmonize those forces of internal and external, and really a philosophy of harmony in general. Like how do we make our organs live in harmony with each other, and different forces within us harmonize and stuff. And so they have all their own little theories about mental health and emotions and stuff like that, as well as physical health. But yeah, whether you're studying to learn acupuncture or Chinese herbalism or Chinese dietary health, like it all kind of goes back to that same root philosophy. So Qigong would want to be one of those branches off of that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. That is going to allow us to transition into your Qigong career.
Sure.
Yeah, I love Taoism. I've read the Tao Te Ching. I've got
yeah, so good. I got 3 copies of it.
I've got a tattoo here, which is based on Taoism.
Cool.
And yeah, like with what you said about harmony, like to find that balance in your life is so important.
Yeah.
So I do want to talk about your Gong career.
Sure.
How you discovered it and your path with yoga. But before that, I want to dive into your childhood.
Sure.
So tell me, do you remember coming out of the womb?
No.
Oh man. Nah. Tell me what your childhood was like. Like, what's your earliest memory?
Gosh, my earliest memories would be from probably about like 2 years old or three. We lived in a condo, and I just remember like playing, or my mom ran a daycare there, so I remember like just playing with the other kids and stuff, going swimming at our pool and things like that.
All right, cool. So good memories.
Yeah.
Leading on then, throughout your childhood, what do you think have been like the memories that you have, or the biggest events that have stemmed or created you as a person today?
Hmm. Some of the big ones would be my mom. She saw my interest in nature very young, and she had a big interest in that too. And so she really kind of nurtured that in me. And I had a grandma who lived in Florida, kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and we'd go every year for about a week or two. And me and my mom would go on big bike rides and hikes and everything, and we'd find alligators and snakes and turtles and pigs and all kinds of crazy animals out there. And I got really obsessed with catching snakes as a kid. And it was kind of funny. My hero as a kid was Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter. The guy, he'd go and catch like the cobras and crocodiles and stuff with his bare hands. He was my hero, even though I'd never seen an episode of his show or ever heard him speak. I only knew it because we had very few TV channels when I was a kid, so we didn't have whatever TV channel had him. So I only knew of him because my friends watched his show and would tell me about it, and we'd do impressions of him and stuff. Crocky, And so I tried to mimic them. But he was my hero, even though I'd never seen him. And so I would go out all the time and catch snakes and newts and salamanders and stuff, and bring everything home and try to keep them as pets, even though they really hated human contact. But
Wow.
yeah, I really, it's kind of funny. What's that?
How did you catch a snake?
Well, I grew up in Canada, so there wasn't a lot of poisonous snakes. So pretty much any snake you saw, you just grab it by the tail, and it would try to bite you, and you just kind of hold it far enough away from you until it gave up or got tired. And yeah.
Wow, that's so much fun. I'd love to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's not a lot of snakes in Ireland because of St. Patrick.
Yeah, he bit all the snakes out of Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just like there are people have tried to people have tried to introduce snakes, and often people will like get snakes and not be able to maintain them at home, not be able to keep them because they just don't think about like what goes into taking care of a snake, and then it goes out into the wild. But it never lasts long because the climate's just so cold.
Oh yeah, it's not like Florida where they got anacondas and stuff out in the swamps now. You got jungle snakes now.
Yeah, I'd love to see that one day. Yeah, that's an amazing childhood. Yeah,
so that's kind of the positive side. Is like, and that was a big refuge for me when I became psychotic. Was that love of nature? That was kind of where I found refuge. Was I would just go into the woods and just be alone. That's where I started learning to meditate and things like that. But being able to kind of lean on that ability to find solitude in nature and be comfortable there, and kind of get out of the social humans sphere and into the natural sphere, just felt like a big part of the healing process for me. But the other side of that, so the human sphere, I'd say the biggest influence was probably my dad, who was just kind of an angry guy and just extremely critical. So like he was just kind of dad that like it didn't matter what you did, like he only told you the part you did wrong. And even if you did something amazing, like the best compliment he could ever give you was like, good, now you should be able to do this next thing that's even better, like he'd take you to play like hockey, he'd take me to play hockey, and the whole ride home he would spend the entire ride home yelling at me about everything I did wrong, you know. So so I'm not trying to like get a pity party, but I just think that became part of the psychosis was all the voices I heard was people just constantly telling me everything I did wrong, everything that sucked about me, like just that was a big part of that. And so but I didn't have any problems with that when I was a kid. I just kind of ignored them. Like my mom was kind of like the good cop to my dad's bad cop, you know, like she kind of was overly nice, maybe to the point of being coddling in order to balance it out. And so I might have got a little bit imbalanced from that. But other than that, like I had very normal friendships, very normal social life, like good friends and everything. And it was really not until like seventh or eighth grade that things started getting a little weird. I was kind of a late bloomer, so everybody got really. I'm like a huge guy now, I'm like 6'4" and everything, but everybody got like way bigger than me really fast in like eighth grade, and they all got testosterone and muscles, and they'd all be doing. Most of my friends would be doing karate and stuff for like years by the time eighth grade came around, and now they all wanted to fight. And all of a sudden, every day at school, even though I wasn't like an outcast being bullied, it was just I was always at the bottom of the pecking order and just getting beat up every day and made fun of every day. And I didn't have the TV channels everyone was watching, so I didn't know what the music or the clothes or the cars were, and I just always sounded like an idiot every time I tried to be cool, you know. And so eighth grade like really left a chip on my shoulder, just from just the weird social experience of just being at the all of a sudden like going from like everybody being equal, like you're just kids and you're having fun, to like all of a sudden like puberty kicks in and everybody's extremely competitive and you're at the bottom of that competition, you know. And when I went to high school, I switched schools because that was the Catholic system I was in, and then I went to the just public system, I guess. And all of a sudden, I didn't know anybody, and I thought, oh, this is my chance, like brand new, fresh start. But I kind of brought these like psychological wounds from that with me, so I brought these kind of stories that like I'm this like loser who doesn't know anything, and you know everybody's gonna pick on me. But I really wanted to not live that. But even when I started making friends, it was a totally different environment. People were a lot nicer in that school system for some reason. But I just kept that social anxiety just never went away. And I just always had this story that like whatever I did, whatever I wore, whatever I said was going to get me made fun of or criticized in some way. And it kind of all culminated. I kind of had a hard time finding a group of friends to fit into too. So I'd have like one really good friend, and he was part of a group of friends, but I was never really in that group. Like the group never really wanted to accept me, so I kind of was always like this weird outsider in the group, even though I was like really good friends with one of them. And I kind of had that with like a couple of groups, you know. And so I was always kind of trying to elbow my way into a group, but never really being accepted. And so that just kept reinforcing this story in my mind, you know, that like I wasn't good enough, I wasn't good enough. And it kind of all culminated in grade 12, in the beginning of grade 12. You know, as I mentioned earlier, like I'd been doing a lot of drugs and starting to get these delusions of grandeur, which were kind of part of my like armor against this like social anxiety. Um, and I go into grade 12 and I've been having these great experiences with LSD and mushrooms, and so much of the time those experiences had been very healing and everything, especially related to some of this social anxiety stuff. And so I do like one, you know, I'm like, let's do LSD again, you know. I convince a couple friends that were kind of in this weird group that I wasn't really part of, and so I wasn't really sure if they're my friends, but I'm hanging out with them anyways, I guess. Mostly I'm like inviting myself to their outings and stuff because nobody's inviting me. And I convinced them to do acid with me, and we all do it together. And which is a really horrible idea. Like you don't want to do LSD with people that like you're not like really close with, and like you don't like have like really good trust and respect and everything between you. So this is completely my fault. But I do LSD with them, and the weirdest experience arises where like it's as soon as it kicks in, like we're sitting in a room together, and I have this vision that I'm like a golden statue, like a Egyptian pharaoh or a statue of a god or something, and I just have this sense of dignity and power, like prestige, like come over me, and I'm like, like this is great. Like I want them to see who I am because I know they don't respect me and I know they don't like me, and I want these assholes to see how fucking awesome I am, you know? and I just will them to see this golden, powerful being that I am. And as I will that to happen, golden light actually shoots out of my body into the room and bounces off the walls and echoes all over the place. And they actually do see it without me having said anything, right? And they're like, "Holy shit, how'd you do that?" and and then we start basically like one of them. I think he probably learned to use telepathy on his own or something. I don't know how he did it. Like he with his cat at home or something on LSD. But he like this was like not news to him. Like he's like, "Oh, we're doing telepathy now. Great." And he had this like all this stuff like prepared, all this material that like he thought like he was gonna show us if he ever got to use telepathy with us. And and it was all like very weird. Like he had some like self-esteem issues or something, and I think a very negative self-image. And I think probably his way to like his coping mechanism for that was to come up with negative self-images for other people. And so he had all these like caricatures that he developed while on LSD, it looked like, of like everyone he knew. And so he just starts showing us all these caricatures of ourselves, but they're all like really like fucked up like horror movie like caricatures. Not like what you would like draw at the amusement park, you know, it's just like taking like some negative quality of you and just blowing it up into this extremely strange archetype and everything.
Wow. Do you have like an example of that?
Was that?
Like, is it like a huge nose or big ear?
Oh, so not like physical stuff. It would be like mostly personality stuff. So like one of them was that I tended to have like a kind of rebellious personality, and I probably took a little bit of pride in that as a teenager. Like I'm the cool guy who like rebels against authority, you know. And he would take that and make it look like extremely stupid, and you know, like make you like really feel like shit about yourself for like having that personality flaw, you know.
Right.
I can't really like quite describe what it looked like, but you know, like what an archetype is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he'd like focus in on the archetype and find like the most ridiculous version of that archetype or something. It's kind of hard to describe, but he had like music that went with it and everything. Like it was this whole like production. Um,
This is all during telepathy.
yeah, this is all a telepathic experience mediated by LSD.
And you're able to feel and hear and see what he is sharing with you.
Yeah, and we all did this with each other, so we like took turns like sharing things. Me and the other guy weren't sharing like caricatures or anything, but we could like basically communicate and send images and stories, and you didn't really so much use words, but it was like like images and emotion and feeling and stuff like that. So sound could kind of come through sometimes too.
Wow. It's really interesting. Have you heard of the autobiography of a yogi?
Yeah, I've read a chapter or two out of that.
Yeah. So in the first chapter of it, it talks about how powerful your thoughts are. And he, with his own thoughts, he commands a person across the road to let go of a kite. Like, he's like, he tells his sister, I'm gonna get that guy to let go of his kite and I'm gonna grab it. And she's like, fuck off, you can't do that. And he's like, no, I will. And he sits there and meditates. He's like, let go of the kite, let go of the kite, let go of the kite. And then he lets go of the kite and he grabs it. And she's like, fuck off, that was just a coincidence, do it again.
Yeah.
And then he does it again. And then he got two kites. And like, I have been, like, it's good to have healthy thoughts anyway, right? It's not good to be paranoid about your thoughts to the point where you're afraid of what you're going to say.
Right.
However, like, if you can have positive thoughts about someone else and you can look for the beauty inside of them instead of the darkness, the light instead of the dark, then, you know, that's beneficial whether or not it is real that you are able to broadcast your thoughts, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because, like, there are a lot of people that struggle with broadcasting thoughts as a schizophrenia symptom.
Yeah.
And it really terrifies them. In fact, it terrified me as well, because whenever I was hearing voices, it was my friends that were in my head.
Yeah, me too.
There was also an English commentator. And they were telling me my thoughts being broadcasted to the whole world, and the whole world were
Oh
tuning
no!
in through
Wow,
YouTube
I
and
thought it was bad when I had my whole neighborhood, but the whole world is even worse.
right.
My,
Yeah, same thing, just on a smaller scale. Like I suppose, like your neighborhood is actually more associated with your tribe, right? Your community.
right.
So like the fear there would be more understandable. Like my biggest fear with the world would have been my community knowing. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting, we both experienced that though. So I don't want anyone like coming away from this like freaking out,
I
being
know. That's
like,
why I'm always kind of hesitant to share that part because I don't want people being like, "I knew it. I knew telepathy was real and it's happening." So yeah, I think I should share what I learned about it
yeah.
because that is what I got very paranoid about.
Before you share what you learn about it, let me say a couple of words on it.
Sure.
So, like, there's a quote, I don't know, by Plato or something like that. The only thing we know is that we don't know. And, like, that's why you gotta accept everything with a pinch of salt. And, like, the most thing that you can do is take control of your own thoughts and your own actions and become the person you want to be by your own thoughts and your own actions. And once you remove the fear, then it does become a bit easier. But what were the lessons that you learned from it?
Well, so obviously I had like a very unpleasant initiation into telepathy. Um, and so as I came out of that, I got very paranoid. First, I thought it was really cool. I'm like, oh, cool, I'm telepathic. And I like added that to my delusion of grandeur. Like, not only am I chosen by the gods and aliens to overthrow the Illuminati as this reincarnated rock star, but I'm psychic, bitch. Like, further evidence that I'm the chosen one.
Superpowers right there.
Yeah. So first I was like trying to use it. I'm like, I wonder if I can like stimulate girls' clitorises with my mind, you know? Like,
Bro, I did the same thing. Oh my god. That's so funny. I
on the girl I liked that I was psychic to like sound really cool. And she's like, oh yeah, read my mind then. And I was like, and then I realized I couldn't do it. And I was like, ah shit. And I was like, I came up with some cheesy line. I'm like, you're too beautiful for your mind to be read or something.
Wow. What did she say to that?
She seemed disappointed.
Oh man. Oh well.
And then actually it was kind of fucked up. So as I was getting paranoid, that my thoughts were, so I kind of went from thinking it was cool to like, wait, what if I can't control it? What if the LSD opened a door in my mind and now the thoughts just leak out all the time? Anytime I put my attention on any person, my attention just starts leaking my thoughts to that person. So I started getting very paranoid. And as that paranoia was happening, the girl I liked, she was like dating some like 25-year-old guy or something, like going to college, and obviously that was very heartbreaking for me. And as I was walking home one day in the middle of winter, like going through my paranoid thoughts and everything, this guy, I'd never met him or anything, so I had no idea who he was, but apparently he'd like seen a picture of me or something, and he knew who I was, and he drove past me, and he leans out the window and he yells like, it's a matter of life or death, or like he yelled some like death threat at me because he knew that I liked his girlfriend or whatever, and I'd like sent her a poem or something in class. And but I had no idea who this was. I didn't know it was him, So, so I'm like, oh my gosh, that guy was hearing my thoughts, and it's true. Everybody hates hearing my thoughts so much; they want to kill me. So it like was this like perfect confirmation. So it was pretty terrible. But yeah, so basically, like I started getting this immense paranoia that the thoughts were leaking out, and then with that came the thoughts coming in. I started hearing like my friends or my family or my neighbors, like very convincing voices of theirs, and really believing that like this was their thoughts being transmitted to me, and them saying like, "Get the fuck out of my head! Like I don't want to hear your thoughts anymore. You should kill yourself." Blah blah blah. Just whatever. And I tried a million things to stop it. I like wrapped tinfoil around my head and like all kinds of stuff, and um,
Oh, bro.
tried tried self-flagellation. Like every time I thought of another person, like I'd like hit myself to like train myself to never think of other people, because I thought it was when I thought of them that was what made the connection happen. So like trying to train myself not to think of them. I tried doing LSD again. I took like 3 hits of acid. I thought maybe I could like cure my brain or something, and basically just spent. I accidentally took a different form of LSD that lasts 24 hours instead of the normal like 8 hours or whatever. So I had 24 hours of this horrible trip where I spent the whole time paranoid. That because now I'm like, oh shit, now I've taken acid. Acid's the only thing I really know for sure can cause telepathy. So I'm really terrified it's going to happen. So I spent the whole time just trying not to think of anybody. And of course, don't think of a purple elephant. The first thing you think of is a purple elephant. So
Sure.
spent the whole time paranoid, but I didn't have any telepathy the whole time until basically the hallmark of this trip was that the kind of trauma from that initial telepathy experience was just being like relived on this LSD. So every hallucination that I had, like every vision, was a negative caricature of myself. So all I could think about was any negative aspect of myself, and then that would blow up into a horrifying like caricature that I never would in a million years want anybody to see. And of course, I thought everybody was seeing them the whole time, right? And finally, I get one like semi-positive caricature, and it was like me, like as a baby, and some like ladies coming to pick me up, and she says, "Oh, I love how much he smiles," because I was getting very psychoanalytical about myself, because I'm like, I know I'm going crazy, so I was thinking a lot about like early childhood and like what's fucked up about me, and I had this weird like early childhood memory of like being a baby being picked up by some woman who loved how much I smiled. And so I had this little positive image of myself as like a smiling like lion child, and my lion's mane was made of like sunflower petals, and that all represented like the sunlight that was coming out of my smile, like, oh, my smile makes everybody happy. And as I was seeing that, I was like, oh, finally a positive vision. And at the time, the person I was paranoid about was like some friend of mine who lived a few blocks away. And I thought, well, if everybody has to see my fucking visions anyways, I might as well show the one positive one. And so I intentionally send this vision to my friend down the street, and it's like 6 in the morning or something. I'd be on acid all night, and this one vision actually did come out of me, and my friend did see that one. And of course, this never happened when I wasn't on LSD. So people who aren't currently on LSD should not shouldn't be so paranoid. But this did, to me, it actually helped, because this was the one time I actually had some intention with my attention. So this is kind of a fine distinction they always try to make with like yoga and meditation and stuff. Is like there's your attention, like you can put your awareness on something and just be aware that it exists, and there's your intention, which is like your mind is trying to change the quality of something you're paying attention to, right? You have some force behind your attention, right? And so it seemed to me like that was evidence. Like the whole trip, like my attention did not create a psychic bond with anybody, but my intention did. And so that should have been evidence that telepathy was under the right chemical conditions or whatever, it could happen, but it would only happen voluntarily. It wouldn't happen involuntarily, at least not sending thoughts. I don't really know about receiving. Um, but so for the rest of that trip, I was actually able to relax, and I was like, oh, it really, because I could really qualitatively tell the difference, that like, oh, it really happened then. And I got evidence of that later. But I was able to relax for the rest of the trip. Like, oh, maybe it's not happening. Like it just happened that one time. I guess I can relax and not worry about it so much. But once the trip wore off, the paranoia all came back. But when I went onto, at the time, we had some kind of like a little messenger program. This was like 2007 or something. And I go onto that messenger program on the internet, and the friend that I'd sent it to had changed their profile to just drop by for a visit with the sunflower lion child. And like that's like such a specific 3 things to like put together, and like obviously that was me who had sent that to him, right? And so that was like pretty good evidence that that really did happen. Um, because I was never going to talk to anybody about this. This was part of the paranoia. Was I was so embarrassed and like humiliated about the whole thing that like I didn't want to ask anybody like, hey, did you see this? Did you see that? Did you hear this? Like, are you receiving my thoughts right now? Like, I just wanted to step away from everybody and everything as far as I could. So I never really like ran an experiment or anything, but that was like basically the closest I came to that. Um, but it was a little bit after, so that was basically when I realized like I was out of options. Like the only thing I knew for self-healing was psychedelic drugs, because those had helped me heal like several other things in the past, but now those weren't an option. I had no idea what to do anymore. And around that time, my mom saw that I had like been skipping school because I couldn't go to school anymore, because I was thought, being close proximity with people seemed like it would even more cause this to happen. So when she found out I was skipping school, she was like, what the hell's going on? And I'm like, I don't know if I'm psychic or crazy. Like, she's like rushed me to a mental hospital. And at the mental hospital, the psychiatrist, I was like, okay, so this is a psychiatrist. They're a medical professional. Their whole job is to like dispassionately work on your problem and like not get involved in your personal life. So I should run this experiment with them, right? That's a safe. That seems safe. It's a mental health professional. And so I say to my psychiatrist while I'm like locked in the mental hospital, because they like literally locked me in there. I couldn't leave if I wanted to, which I didn't want to. But I'm like, hey, like, here's what I'm going through. Here's what I'm paranoid about. I'm totally open to the possibility that I'm just being paranoid, but I just want some evidence. So can we just run an experiment where I think of a number, I write it on this piece of paper you can't see, and I try to send it to you, and you just try to tell me what the number is, right? Or the shape or whatever it is. And they wouldn't even try running it with me. I went through 3 different psychiatrists while I was there, and not a single one would even attempt the experiment. I don't know if it was like some legal reason that like they can't entertain the patient's delusions, or if it was just their personal belief that it was so out of the possibility that telepathy could be real that they shouldn't even entertain the possibility. Um, but it was just so weird to me. And as I came out of the hospital, I was very, very medicated, to the point of becoming extremely chronically ill with all kinds of diseases, um, for years. It lasted years and years and years. I still have some of the diseases. I still have to like manage them through diet and everything. Um, but when I got out of the mental hospital, the thing that helped me heal more than absolutely anything else was just having a friend come over who was my most serious, responsible friend that I knew. And when I knew he wouldn't lie to me, and when I tried my absolute hardest, like he came over and he gave me a book on meditation. That was part of how I got into meditation. And he said, I really want to help you. I've heard what you're paranoid about. Let's just try it. Like, whatever, like try to send me some thoughts. And I tried as hard as I could, and my thoughts were just blaring out of my head. It was like I had a megaphone I was talking through my head. It just seemed absolutely out of any possibility that he wasn't hearing my thoughts. My thoughts were so loud and so seemingly outside of my head. It felt so real. Like he should have heard them, but he didn't. And he told me, and I believed him just because I knew he was a really honest guy. And I guess some people are so schizophrenic that they wouldn't believe anybody because they're so their paranoia is so deep. But I still had at least a little bit of like sensibility and trust in me, that I was able to believe him. But it's not like that cured it like right away. Just for that hour, like I wasn't paranoid, but then it came back. And so I basically kept going
Yeah.
through that process. Like I had a girlfriend, and she was very paranoid in her own way, like extremely like jealous and possessive and stuff. And so I kind of knew like if she was reading my mind, like we'd have problems. And when I'd have like my psychotic episodes, like I think she like I swear to God, my thoughts are so loud, she must be hearing them, but she wouldn't be. And I would know if she was hearing them because we'd have a big fight, about whatever I was thinking about some girl's boobs or something, like. And so it was that constant like reinforcement of like, and my mom sometimes would do this with me too, like, hey, I'm not hearing your thoughts, like relax. And just constantly getting it like verified, like it feels as real as it could possibly feel, but it's not happening, right? And that happening over, and it had to happen hundreds of times before I finally like, it became like now it's only I have an episode like once a day, and now once a week, and now once a month, now once a year, and And eventually it just, and then it became with different environments, right? Like I'd go to a yoga class and I'd be like, oh shit, did yoga, like if I do yoga, is that going to open up my telepathy channels? And I'd be so paranoid the whole time. And I'd get up and everybody would treat me just as normally as they did before. And I'd be like, oh, I guess nothing weird happened. And then it would be meditation, I'd be like, oh, can I meditate around people? Is that going to, and I just had to keep meeting these different environments and just seeing that that wasn't going to happen. And yeah, that was mostly what did it. And then eventually I got off the pills, but I don't think it was because the pills cured me. Honestly, I think it was because I just, like, life cured me. Like I just put myself in the right situations enough and did enough yoga and stuff and meditation to help me partly half the story was just learning to relax and stuff and surrender and let go. And yeah.
Yeah, it's the impact that environment and the support can have on you whenever you are in that delusional state and believing these thoughts. Like, it is so affirmative to have that. It's like a safe space to bring you back to the ground. I definitely experienced that too whenever I was hearing voices. My mental health nurse, she was a lifesaver. She would tell me, like, what the thoughts are saying to you, it's not real. The grandeur delusions that you're experiencing, believing that like secret services are after you, it's not real.
Right.
And it's so important to have someone tell you that it's not real, because like you said about how your friend was the only person that you trusted there whenever you told him about the number and you tried the telepathy. Like, yeah. I think it's so important for you to be able to do that experiment yourself, because until you actually do the experiment, you're not going to believe anything else, because like that is the trial and error within all of us, right? We all love the experiment. I mean, look at Elon Musk. He probably experiments like 50 times a day with 50 different things. If you look at all the
$10 million rockets and stuff.
right, yeah, you look at all the mad scientists that ended up being geniuses. They experimented with the most ridiculous things to start off with, and then eventually find these ways. So
well, that's what's weird. That's what I found weird about the treatment, was like they want to just treat it as a chemical imbalance, which I do think is a big part of the picture, but they don't want to look at the individual and their unique experience and how. I mean, I thought it was weird because it's not like psychology is like a new concept or something. Like, it was just so odd that like they wouldn't even prescribe like a therapist. Like, shouldn't you talk to a therapist if you're psychotic? Like, they just wanted to give me drugs and sedate me and just keep me on the drugs until it went away, or perhaps for life if it didn't go away. And I just thought it was so weird because when I did research on it, it's a known scientific fact that most people who develop psychosis have some kind of trauma in their past. And like, why wouldn't you give them therapy? Most people's psychosis, like, it has a theme. It's like often it relates to like something that happened with their parents or something that happened with their classmates or something growing up, or it's like it's usually not just random. It usually relates to something in their subconscious.
Yeah, I'm of the belief that like nothing in life is random. Like, I don't believe in coincidences. I believe that there is a reason for everything. And like, part of people's psychosis is giving meaning to everything.
Right, yeah.
Where they give it the wrong meaning, right? But then they believe that it is this meaning. So,
and that meaning often ties into a subconscious story, right?
Completely.
A story about themselves or the world or something, right?
Yeah. So you said that your voices were your friends. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I never had any fictional ones.
And that's interesting. I did have one fictional one, but
that's funny.
My friends.
Yeah.
But you also said about like not being fully accepted into your friend group.
Yeah.
How many voices did you have?
Probably didn't have more than a dozen.
A dozen. And all of these people were all in your friend group?
I think the vast majority of the time I was hearing people from that friend group. Yeah.
And what were they saying to you?
They give a lot. So a big part of the theme was that they were all sick of hearing my voice in their head, and were trying, like, telling me ways to shut my brain down from doing that. Like, you need to eat more apples, or like stupid things that didn't make sense. Yeah, or like just fuck off. Like, go to another planet. Like, I don't know. So they were like very angry about it. Um, I can't really remember a lot else that I heard. That was like the main thing. That's kind of odd.
Right. And you said that some of it was similar to what your dad would have said whenever you were younger.
Yeah, similar. Like, everything was kind of very critical, but that was almost more coming from myself. So the worst part of psychosis was not the voices; it was the belief that everything I thought everybody else was hearing. So it was just constant, like, humiliation and embarrassment, because
Yeah.
I'd be thinking like, "Oh, like, don't think of, like, the worst things about yourself. Don't think of the most embarrassing things about yourself." And so then, like, that was all I could think about, because I'm trying not to think about it. And so then every time I thought of, like, something I was embarrassed about, something I'd lied about, like something like just anything that, like, I didn't want other people to hear. Then I'd like think that thought got out, and then I'd be like, "Oh, well, now I gotta, like, explain that. Like, and so, like, I think people were like if I'm, like, taking a shit, like, I think people could, like, see me shitting. Like, I'm, like, jerking off. I think people could see what I'm jerking off to. It's like the whole thing was just such a nightmare, for especially for a teenager. Like,
I had that too, man. Like, I couldn't wank because everyone was like hearing me and watching me.
I did it for months.
Which, with the semen retention, is probably good.
Yeah, there's some benefits to that for sure.
It's interesting that you say like that was the worst part, because that was also the worst part for me. It wasn't the voices; it was my intrusive thoughts.
Yeah.
And there is a book called Madness Explained, where it mentions about how there's people that hear voices within their daily lives and they actually live like a balanced lifestyle. It's just about how they react to them, and it's not necessarily the voices that are the negative thing, but the reaction to them.
Yeah.
Nick, let's get into the deep philosophical question of why do you think we hear voices?
I think the voices and the hallucinations and the strange abstract lenses we view reality through, I think that part actually might be the chemical imbalance part. So I do think there is a chemical component and a brain structure, not structure, but a brain performance component, um, that then mixes with your beliefs, traumas, experiences, whatever, reactions, to create the psychotic experience. So I've noticed for myself, even though I consider myself, like, recovered, I can put myself back into kind of quasi psychotic states, just by, like, letting my health deteriorate. Like, if I eat food that doesn't agree with me for long enough, I'll start looking at the clock again for the signs. I'll get little weird things. I'll hear voices in my head occasionally, and for a second I believe them, and then I have to, like, remind myself, like, wait, that was obviously not actually that person's thoughts, and I kind of got to pull myself back. And so it's really easy now, like, oh, you're right, that's crazy, come back to reality. But it is pretty noticeable how, um, if I am unhealthy for a while, or I have prolonged period of extreme stress or anything like that, that I can start to get back, the symptoms. So one thing I've actually noticed for myself that's kind of interesting is trauma. Like, I can think of, like, all kinds of things in my life that you could call trauma. And it's not, like, as bad as, like, being tortured in Afghanistan or something. But just the little experiences you have that kind of shape your worldview. Um, and so, for instance, like, let's say, like, past relationships that were difficult. You're with a kind of difficult person, and they influence the way you think about relationships. And romantic relationships. And then when you're in a new relationship, you kind of bring some of that baggage with you, and you're looking out for those, like, oh, this person got mad at me all the time about this thing, so I'm always going to be paranoid in this new relationship that if I do this thing, my new partner's going to be mad at me. What's interesting is I found that those things only come up if I start to shift back to like physically, emotionally unhealthy states. So if I eat food that gets me constipated and eat food that has a lot of heavy metals in it, and I'm not doing the practices like qigong and meditation that help me stay calm and chill, and so my stress levels and toxin levels start to rise, then all of a sudden these like past traumas start to suddenly rear their heads, and I'm all of a sudden looking through the lens of my traumas at, let's say in my romantic relationship, right? And my wife will be like, hey, like, relax, like, this is your past trauma talking, this isn't like reality, this isn't our relationship. And I'll be like, oh wow, it's so weird because I wasn't looking at our relationship through this trauma a week ago, but I am today. And why is that? And it's pretty much guaranteed that it just relates to nothing to do with the past, but actually the present mental, emotional, biological state that I've managed to put myself in is what seems to determine whether that trauma has any effect on my present reality at all. And so I've gotten me really a little bit skeptical, actually. There's tons of people online like talking about trauma these days, and they all have some kind of like therapy for addressing trauma, rooting out trauma, getting to the bottom of trauma. And I think that's probably like a really important thing. I've definitely had experiences where I faced some past trauma and like got some insight, and it's gotten me over it in some way. But I also have noticed if I just work in the present on my nervous system, my biology, my present thoughts, that it almost makes that past trauma like completely irrelevant to the present. And I don't know how to square that with the fact that you can also address the past trauma and it changes the present. But it's just something I've noticed.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I've found the exact same thing. Particularly whenever I was doing research into psychosis, I was like, oh, it must be trauma related. Oh, I must have been like sexually abused as a kid, because there's like such a link between this. And I did have like these visions as well that sort of like reaffirmed that to me.
Like fake,
But
like 'cause that happens in psychology, right? Like the fake memories. Yeah,
yeah, um,
I put myself through that a bit too.
yeah, there is that in psychology,
Yeah,
and I'm not cutting out the possibility that this could have happened, but I'm also not diving into it because it's not going to help me. And
right.
like you said about the trauma, if you focus on the present, and if you focus on your like digestive system and your exercise and connecting your mind and body and like really focusing on the basics, then the trauma becomes almost irrelevant then.
Yeah.
And I experienced that like so much. And then I listened to a podcast on trauma, and I'm like trauma has became like mainstream to talk about now,
Yeah,
right?
it's a real buzzword.
It is a proper buzzword, man. It's like, yeah, man, like, yeah, I got bullied whenever I was 4, and now I carry that on to me until 40, and like, it's not, it's not to say that trauma is important, and it is important to learn the lesson from it. However, if you consistently look in the past then and focus on your trauma for too long, you're living in the past then, and you're never moving on. We have this saying in like Irish mythology that uh, a stone rolling down a hill doesn't collect any moss, and the metaphor is sort of like to keep the ball moving. Once you stop keeping the ball moving, you're gonna collect this moss, and this moss is like a metaphor for like all the shit that you've gone through in the past. And like I really try to focus on what is in my control in the present moment, and that's why I have this playlist called How to Battle Psychosis, and in it I mention everything that you can do like now. And I've been debating, like, why have I not made one on trauma yet? And it's one, because I'm not qualified to talk about trauma, and two, because the more that you put yourself into that position, you're reliving the trauma every time, and you feel the emotions and the memories that happened back then. But yeah, I'm so glad you touched on that. I think I'm actually gonna like clip that and make like a a short video on that.
Yeah. Recent insights.
Yeah, powerful stuff, man. Thank you.
That's true, because the way our subconscious looks at things is through stories. That's why all like religions operate through story, right? It doesn't always matter how true a religion is, like how literally true their stories are, but the fact that they're conveying psychological meaning through that story is what makes it so powerful. That it's not just saying, "Oh, be a good person," right? It's saying, "Oh, look at this man who like was mutilated and died on the cross. Like he was such a good person. He was willing to completely like dissolve his physical body on a it's like the most extreme story possible about a person being a good person, and that stuff like sears itself in our subconscious mind, like whatever the story is. And so I think like the way you live your life tells your subconscious a story. So if you live a life where like you're achieving positive things, you're helping people in your community, you're being a good member of your family, and like eventually your subconscious mind can't keep up the story that you're worthless or nobody likes you, or like you deserve to be bullied or whatever it is. Like eventually your subconscious is looking at the news story of your life and is saying like, wow, this is a real story. Let's integrate this as the self-image or the picture of reality or whatever. So I think you know the trauma work is good, but if it becomes your whole life, then that's your new story, is you're the person who is dealing with this horrible thing that happened to you, and now that's your story. So now it's like the trauma therapy is the trauma now because it's telling you a story about yourself that like you're a victim, or you're this all bad things always happen to you or whatever, or you're not ready to handle anything new because you're still dealing with the old, so you're like you're not resilient, so I think as much as a little part of your story can be, oh, every once in a while I go to a sweat lodge and do some sweat ceremony, or I see a therapist or something to deal with my past trauma, but it can't be your whole reality. Like most of your reality needs to tell you a story that you're moving forward and you're making positive things happen,
Completely, man. Preach, brother. Not to diminish the importance of trauma therapy, but it is not everything. And if anything,
Not to diminish it, but it's fucking stupid.
Yeah, fuck your trauma. No, it is. It can have some important implications to learn the lesson from it. But once you've learned the lesson, like you got to move on.
Right.
So yeah, I want to go into your recovery.
Sure.
So, you mentioned your friend brought a meditation book to you, and I listened on your on one of your podcasts that you spoke about like going to a river to meditate, and that helped you, and like you found like a yoga video from your mom or something like that.
Yeah. So the first thing I started was meditation, and probably about a year later, I got into like yoga as a physical practice. But the meditation was funny. So like I got it. My friend, the book he gave me was like a novel, and it was like a fictional story about the Buddha. So it was like, I guess it was like a fictional version of how he found enlightenment. So it was like roughly the same story, but with like a lot of fictional stuff added in to make it a more interesting story. And in this version, the way he finds enlightenment is he sits next to a river every day, and he listens to the sound of the river, and he makes that sound the object of his meditation. So like every time his mind wanders away, he comes back to listening to the river until his mind finds perfect stillness, and then he finds enlightenment, right? And so I was like, okay, that's how you meditate, And I had a little creek near my mom's house, and so I'd walk through the woods of that creek pretty much every day that I could get out there, and I'd spend like a solid like hour or two there, and then I'd come home, and then I'd go back a few hours later, and I'd spend an hour or two there. So I was like pretty like solidly committed to meditating on this river, and I really had nothing else like positive to do. Because like the whole therapy I'd been offered is like just take this pill every day, and then just suffer until it kicks in. And who knows how long that's going to take, you know? And so it was really the only thing I knew to do. Basically that, and then I'd go home and I'd like listen to Alan Watts recordings and stuff. And that was like my whole personal thing that I could do. So I was like really into it. I'd go and like sit there for like hours at a time and like just continuously like mind on the river, mind on the river, mind on the river, mind on the river, and like nothing would happen. Like I got zero benefit, but it was the only thing I knew to do. So I just kept doing it, and I was like pushing as hard as I could. And it was like months of this, and then finally, after months of hours and hours and hours of zero benefit, I got my mind to stick on that river long enough that I actually made my mind quiet. And, you know, leading up to this, like at first is like you couldn't stick your mind on that river for more than half a second and it would be off with some other thought, especially because I thought those thoughts were being heard by other people and I was hearing other people's thoughts. You know, so it's like meditating as a normal person is like super hard, but meditating as a schizophrenic is like absolutely an insane task. And it was only because it was the only thing I knew to do that I kept doing it. But eventually I got to the point where I actually had trained my mind to 100% focus on the river. And I don't even know how long it was. It wasn't even very long. It might have been like 30 seconds or like 20 seconds or like a minute maybe. Um, but I was completely mentally quiet, like zero thought. The only object in my mind was the sound of the river for like less than a minute. And in that time, I like looking back, I think what happened was because my conscious mind completely emptied of thought, it created a vacuum that allowed whatever was in my unconscious to come up to the surface. And so at first it's just like I'm just like in total stillness, total quiet, and it's like really cool and zen and everything. But then into this like vacuum of silence, like just an eruption, like a lightning bolt. Um, this archetype comes out of me that I see myself as. It was everything I hated about myself, everything I was embarrassed about, everything I'd ever been picked on about, like just everything that sucked about me came up in this like mutant archetype. And it was a mutant because like, you know, in like the X-Men, like you're a mutant, so like you got to hide and you're like kicked out of society, and then Professor Xavier comes and like, no, you're not a mutant, you're not a freak, just come to my school and like everybody loves you, you know. So it was like a mutant because like here I am like sitting next to this river like trying to hide from people because you're hearing my thoughts, you know. And so I see this like green slimy mutant with like locks of hair like dripping down his face and like moles everywhere and like these evil yellow eyes, you know. And like all I could see was like the selfishness in me and the narcissism and the deceitfulness and just everything I hated about myself that I thought like no one should ever like I'd never be worthy of love because anybody saw who I really was, they would fucking hate me, you know. And it all came up and like again like just a lightning bolt. This archetype just erupts out of me, and for a moment I identify with it. I'm like, this is me, and I'm like horrified. I'm like, oh, I hope nobody sees this because this is like everything, the worst stuff about me, all in this one archetype. And then as quickly as it came up, it was off me like a mask, and it was like a mask came off and flipped around, and it showed me this is just a mask. Like this is not you. This is just stories you've been telling yourself. And underneath the mask, I saw who I really was, and I saw like the innocence and the worthiness of love, and it's like I just connected to myself like a father like hugging a little child that like didn't deserve to believe all those things about himself. And I literally just cried for like 20 minutes straight as like I just poured all the love into myself that I didn't think I deserved and didn't even know I needed. Um, and just sobbed as just poured snot into this river for 20 minutes straight, and left that river like feeling like 20 pounds lighter and just my mind blown, but my mind also like feeling like really vindicated because I was like, I knew this wasn't just some chemical bullshit, man. There's some fucked up stuff in my subconscious, you know. Like I knew there was more of a psychological element to this. And I came out of that like just even more determined to like pursue whatever these Eastern arts were and everything that would help with this inner transformation and everything. And it was shortly after that I found yoga. My mom like was like had been trying to convince me for a while, like, hey, come to a yoga class. And in my head, I was like, yoga, that's like that stupid thing that like moms do, or like roll around on the floor stretching or something. Like, why the frick would I want to do that?
Stupid thing that moms do.
And but finally I was like, okay, fine, I'll go. And she takes me to this like level 2 Anusara yoga class, and that's like this insanely athletic, detail oriented yoga. And I was like 70 pounds overweight from the antipsychotic meds, and so doing a body weight workout program was like incredibly challenging. um and so I shook the whole time and like sweated like buckets, and by the time I'm like laying on the floor at the end, like I think something about the sweating, like yoga is like kind of marketed as like a detox thing, and I really experienced that the first time I did it. Like something had like left me with that sweat and the wringing out of my muscles and tissues and everything, and I just could not believe how like light and relaxed and carefree and amazing I felt, and like I could really let go. um and so I was like totally hooked and sold like right away. And so that was around the time like this meditation experience had happened. And so as I was going back to the river to like keep doing this meditation thing, like it was actually really hard for me because every time my mind started to get still again, I would completely freak out. Because I was like, man, it's like a demon gonna come out of me again. Like, and I just freak out and I lose my focus. And so I couldn't get myself back to that point. And also I think some things that
Sorry,
started
Nick.
changing my life too.
Sorry to interrupt you. See, whenever you were doing this meditation and this yoga, were you on medication at the time?
Yeah, I was.
You were?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I don't know if you've seen this before, but there's an article of this woman who was on, I don't think it was antipsychotic meds, I think it was antidepressive meds, and she took it, and then she went cold turkey on it. She was on this medication for a couple of years. She went cold turkey on the medication, and then she went to do a 10-day Vipassana.
Yeah.
And while she was on the 10-day Vipassana, she went into an episode of psychosis on like the third day, and she got like rushed out, taken to a psychiatric ward, and yeah, like a month later, she ended up committing suicide because she wasn't able to get out of this like psychotic episode. So I do want to warn people, like anyone who is on medication and then wants to go like deep into meditation, that this effect can happen. Obviously, your story is amazing, and like I completely relate to that fear that you experienced. I also sort of experienced that with meditation as well. I was like hardcore into it and then sort of like veered away because of the thoughts and the fears. However, yeah. So back to your story then. You were doing yoga, and well, how long did it take for you to go off the medication?
I was on it for 2 years.
2 years. And like how long into your psych, like within that 2 years, how long were you doing the meditation and yoga before?
So I started the meditation like pretty much as soon as I got out of the mental hospital the first time. So I was basically psychotic for a year, and it got worse and worse until it was like crippling. And then I went to the mental hospital. So that was a year. And then as soon as I got out of the mental hospital, my friend came and visited me and gave me that book, and I started meditating. And then maybe not even a year, it's probably like 6 or 8 months after that, I started doing yoga. And so I was meditating, doing yoga for like good, basically the whole time. So that whole 2 years, and that I think was a big part of what let me get off of them. But yeah, I always say that people, because on my TikTok, like I've talked a lot about like, here's what helped me deal with my psychosis, meditation, yoga, blah blah. And a lot of people like interpret that as like, oh, jump off the meds cold turkey, and like, yeah, like I did not do that. Like I worked with my psychiatrist. I slowly weaned off them. I waited till I was like really confident that I was ready. um and I'd like already installed these like new structures in my life and everything. um yeah, and also I don't even know if like meditation's like a great tool for psychosis for most people. Like I didn't actually think it was a great tool for me, except for that one experience that took me months and hours of practice to attain. I think it could probably make some people worse. Like in Qigong, we talk about like where your energy is in your body. And if you're like psychotic, it's often like you got too much energy in your head. And so if you're doing like a very mental practice like meditation, it can actually like generate more energy in your head. So you actually want to do something more in your body. So that's kind of what I found when I found yoga was that I realized like I didn't need to use my mind to fix my mind. Like I always I kind of been thinking about it like, oh, like if it's something wrong with my brain, then you take a pill that fixes your brain chemistry. If it's something wrong with your subconscious and your trauma and your mind, then you do therapy or you think about your past or you talk it out or you read psychology books, or you meditate and you learn to focus your mind and you get into your subconscious. But with yoga, that the first time I did yoga, I realized like, man, my body is a big part of this. Like if I stretch the muscles and heat up my body relaxes. And when my body relaxes, so does my mind. Like I can actually let go of the anxiety and fear through my body. And that was like totally mind blowing to me. And what's funny to me is it took me like 3 more years to figure out that the food I put in my body might have something to do with all this too. So I was eating like McDonald's like 3 times a day for like the whole like 2 years I was on those meds, and a little beyond that too.
Wow, I can imagine what that McDonald's was doing to you. Like, I feel sick after eating it for one meal.
So I'm pretty sure a lot of the health diets I did after that were worse, ironically. Becoming vegan and doing raw fasting, juice cleanses, keto. Like I'm pretty sure those all have messed me up in a bunch of ways too. So
Really? Why do you think experimenting with those messed you up?
well, so I think every specialized diet can be a bit of a double-edged sword, and that's why you don't see a lot of people or like ancient cultures. It's very rare to find one that like does that specialized diet. So yeah, you can find people doing keto, carnivore in like the Arctic where that's the only food to eat, but also like their ancestors have been living on that for like 10,000 years, like they're a little bit genetically adapted. Or like veganism, like there are some rare cultures like Buddhist monks and stuff who are like 100% vegan. Most cultures that do vegan are doing like vegetarian, they're at least having like dairy and eggs and stuff like in India.
Yeah.
So it's like those are pretty extreme diets that you only see in like extreme minority examples in humanity. So like that's why they're like should be done very prescriptively. Like you have a very specific illness with a very specific cause, and so then maybe you do like an extreme diet, like you cut out carbohydrates completely or you cut out vegetables completely or you cut out meat completely or whatever it is. But most humans do the best on a balanced diet, right? Like our bodies crave balance and variety and stuff, and when you restrict like a whole food group or a whole macronutrient, that's an extreme thing to put your body through for most people. And so at first there can be like some kind of benefit to it, like, oh, you like lowered your inflammation or you gave your body a whole ton of extra fiber or like stuff like that. And so you get like a benefit out of it. But what I found was like after that benefit wore off, after like a few weeks or something, then the problems start kicking in, and the problems were often worse than the benefit. So the benefit was good.
Yeah, I resonate with that. Like the first time I went vegetarian, I felt amazing. And then the first time I went vegan, I went amazing. But it quickly went away and I started to feel like tired and fatigued. And then I tried to get back on to beef. I felt like sick straight away. And then I tried organic beef and I felt amazing.
Oh, that's interesting.
And yeah, like I think it actually is important to experiment for yourself and see what works and to not go with what society tells you to do, because society will probably tell you to go vegan. And
yeah,
Which,
I think Instagram like pushes it or something. I think the employees at Instagram are like vegans or something, and they push it up in the channels or something.
Completely, yeah. It's either vegan or carnivore at the minute.
and there's
Yeah,
like
you have to be
no
one of the
between.
extremes, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why I really love Chinese medicine, because they're very about like balance. It's like figuring out like what your specific imbalance is, and your imbalance, like the way they look at it, it might be like you have like yin and yang, right? So if you're too yang, you might have like a lot of heat in your body. You overheat, your skin turns red, you get inflammation, you're very angry and loud and overweight. Then they'd be like, oh, you need more cooling yin foods, so eat like more salads and stuff, um, and like juices, have cucumber and things like that. And you might be too yin, you're cold, you're underweight, you're kind of anxious and like weak-willed, and so they'd be like, oh, you need more like warming foods, have more like ginger and beef and things like that. But they would never be like, oh, like beef is the best food for everybody, or like salad, like why everybody should eat salad, like it's pretty much never like that. Like, so it's just such a more mature, like Western medicine is so immature compared to these like ancient medicines. It's like a teenager, it goes through like phases and it gets like super hung up on like this one new thing,
That's a great metaphor. It is just like a teenager. Yeah. Uh, Nick, can you tell us a story about how you got introduced to Qigong? I really love like the story of you going over to like, was it California or something like that to meet the Qigong master?
Yeah. So yeah, I grew up in Canada, and I did yoga for like 4 years as part of my recovery, and was getting a lot of benefit out of it. So I decided, like, man, it'd be really cool to be a yoga teacher. And the teacher I'd been following, well, like he made a lot of DVDs. So I only really did his DVDs, and he always made them out of some beautiful place in Costa Rica or like Bali or something. It was always so gorgeous. And I was a big nature freak, and so that was always awesome for me. Like, oh, you're like going on a trip through nature, and so when I thought like, oh, yoga's benefited me so much, and I love nature so much, I could be like this guy and put it together and go like film like yoga videos in nature and run retreats and places in nature and stuff. And so I decided to take the jump and become a yoga teacher. And when I did, I went to do his like 20-day training, and it was like, 20 days you like go live in like a town where he's teaching or whatever, and you go every day for like 6 hours a day and train and everything. And it was just so much more yoga than like my body was used to. And because I'd been doing yoga, I got really into veganism. And I think the combination of those two things, doing like the extra yoga and probably being like deficient in a few nutrients, all of a sudden my body started like falling apart. It's like all my connective tissues suddenly, instead of like feeling like my muscles were stretching, it was like my tendons were like becoming inflamed, and the stuff holding my joints together was like starting to fall apart. And all of a sudden I had like hypermobile knees that like bent in too many directions and everything. And also I did the 10-day Vipassana right before, and sitting cross-legged for 10 days straight seemed to mess up my knees somehow. And so I kind of came into this training with like already messed up knees, and now I'm messing them up more with like overstretching and under nutrient probably. And so I come out of the training, and like I've graduated, like I could do all the forms right, I had all the knowledge, but all of a sudden this tool that had benefited me so much, particularly psychologically, was no longer accessible to me, because every time I did it, I felt like I was destroying my connective tissues, and it was very painful. And so I went to a physical therapist, and he's like pushing me in all these directions, like, does this hurt, does that hurt? I'm like, no, everything feels fine. He's like, well, when does it hurt? I'm like, well, just when I do yoga. Like, at no other point in my life do I have any pain except doing yoga. And he's like, well, just don't do yoga. And I'm like, well, I just dropped out of college and spent my last tuition money on this yoga teacher training, and I have no job, no education, and like no skills. So I was kind of banking on this yoga thing. So I was kind of screwed. But I think it was like kind of all, in the Tao for me or whatever, because kind of halfway through this yoga training, a martial arts teacher who like was teaching at a gym that I'd been like cleaning toilets at as a job before doing this yoga teacher training, sent me an email like, hey, I think you'd really like this practice called Qigong. If you like yoga, you're going to dig this. And I was like, what the heck's Qigong, and I tried the little YouTube video he sent me of this guy, Lee Holden, who like lives in California. And it was just like a 7-minute routine. You're just standing there. It's not like yoga where you're like getting up and down all over the place and putting your head between your legs and everything. It's like you stand in one spot, you do these like simple, gentle movements. Most of it wasn't even anything to do with stretching. You're literally just moving slowly as like a meditation, and linking slow breath with that. And it was just a 7-minute video, and I was used to this like hour and a half like yoga things and long meditations and everything. And that 7 minutes of Qigong, I felt more relaxed and at peace than I had from any other practice I'd ever done. It was like my whole body was made of cotton. My emotions were like soft and calm and chill. And I was just so surprised. I went to bed that night and I had a wart on the bottom of my foot. It's like really deep set wart that had been there for like 4 years or something. Like the whole time I'd been psychotic, I guess I'd had this wart, and I'd done everything to get rid of it. I froze it. I did the liquid nitrogen at the doctor. The doctor cut it off with a scalpel. I did the duct tape. I did the creams. It always just came back the next day. But that night, I had this like a peaceful energy in my body, and I just started breathing into my foot and imagining white light going to my wart, and my foot like started buzzing or something. And I kind of like put myself to sleep doing this because it was so relaxing. But when I woke up the next morning, this enormous wart, it was like the size of a quarter and like a half inch deep into my foot. Like it was really freaking like embedded in my foot. And it was completely gone as though it had never been there. The skin looked completely brand new. And I was like, what the heck? And I told my mom, and she didn't really believe me, but at least I have one person who can verify that I said that this happened. But
Man, I love that story so much.
yeah, so I was like pretty sold on the qigong. And the other cool thing was like qigong, unlike yoga, which like my yoga teacher was like, doing yoga in nature, but yoga wasn't necessarily like a practice about nature. Qigong was about nature. Like every movement, every exercise was like named after an animal or a tree or a mountain or something from nature. And the whole philosophy of Taoism that it came from was like a whole philosophy around harmony with nature. And so it was just so like up my alley with my passions. And so I just kind of like dove headfirst into it. And so this was kind of like, there's kind of this break in between the yoga training. So it was like 10 months in May and like 10 months in September or something. And in the middle is when I found Qigong. And so I come out of this yoga training and I've like ruined my body and I can't do yoga anymore. But I found this Qigong thing. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'll just make Qigong like my thing now, because, yoga was cool because I got really flexible and I got abs, and I, felt like I was getting really strong from it. But I love weightlifting, so I can just lift weights if I want to get muscles, and I really was doing the yoga just for the inner peace and the psychological benefits. So I might as well just do this qigong because it's kind of just a more direct path to that, without trying to also, give me muscles and six pack and give me all these weird skills of handstands and everything. But anyways, the qigong seemed to give me more bang for my buck with less time psychologically, so I dove really into that. And spent about 2 years just practicing and learning that. And I taught a little bit just because I technically had the yoga teacher certification. So sometimes I'd go and say that I taught Chinese yoga and teach Qigong places, even though I had no certification in it. And I was I pretty much just doing DVDs from this Lee Holden guy. And then one day I booked a session with him over Zoom, right? And just to kind of figure out what was going on with me, because every once in a while the psychosis would kind of come back a little bit. And I was working landscaping at the time, actually. And this kind of goes with the theory I was just telling you about, where I would do landscaping. It'd be like, 10-hour day of like backbreaking labor. I'd be coming home exhausted and stressed because my boss would be like yelling at me the whole time. Like I was never doing anything right or fast enough, and so I'd be so stressed the whole time, like trying to please this boss. And when I'd be coming home on the bus, I'd be starting having the psychotic symptoms again. I'd be thinking the people on the bus could hear my thoughts and everything. And I was like, that's weird. And so I booked a session with this Qigong teacher. Like maybe he has some theory on this that I don't really understand. And so I told him like everything that had happened and my whole story and psychosis and everything. And he's like, all right. Yeah, maybe you're psychotic, but maybe your energy system is just a little leaky, like like in Qigong, they have this idea that like there's the energy, the Qi, right, which is energy. There's like life energy circulating inside your body. But just like when electricity is moving through a wire, it's not really just the electricity in the wire, but there's a electrical field around the wire. And that electrical field is actually a bigger part of what gets the energy from point A to point B than the electrons in the wire. And so the body's seen just like that in Qigong. Like there's the energy inside the body, but then there's a field of energy outside the body. It's pretty much just as important. And if this energy is like weak, then you basically interface with other people's and your environment's energy in a more sensitive way. And when he started telling me that, it started to make things make a little more sense for me. Like I knew that most of what I've experienced was just paranoia. Like I knew that I wasn't really sending thoughts to other people, except those couple times on acid. I knew that I really wasn't hearing other people's thoughts, but there was always this like quality that I felt that I couldn't understand that made it all feel so real. And I realized, talking to my Qigong teacher, that there is some ability that there's layers, right? So there's your physical body, there's your like mental, psychic body, right? But then there's like an energetic or emotional body that's something kind of in between those. And I started to wonder, like, what if I'm just kind of tuned in a more like feeling kind of way to other people's experiences and energy and everything? And so what if there's like another way to tune in that isn't thoughts and broadcasting thoughts and receiving thoughts? That's something more like subtle and formless than that. And so this teacher taught me this specific kind of like medical prescriptive Qigong sets that like bring your energy out into this field and make it kind of denser and thicker and kind of basically make you more like thick skinned. And when he taught me this, like I would literally feel this field, like you put your hands against it, it'd be like you hit a magnetic wall, like two magnets repelling each other. Like you could feel this field get denser as I practice. And maybe that's all like placebo or something like that. But I would really like feel in my life, like the more that I developed that sensation, that the more not only that I was insulated from that paranoia of like interfacing with other people psychically, but I felt more insulated in general. Like I felt like if someone else was having a bad experience, I didn't have to rush in and be their hero and change how they felt right away. Right. Like, here's a weird thing. Like I was sitting on a bus once when I was like halfway through my psychosis, and there was a homeless man sitting next to me, and it was like a super crowded bus, and there's like one seat in between us, and he like wants to reach over and shake my hand. And I'm like, oh, okay, like you want to shake my hand? I'll be nice. We'll shake your hand. And then he keeps shaking it and he won't let go. Right. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I don't want to make him feel bad by pulling my hand away. So I'll just keep shaking his hand, and then he wants to like hug my hand, like hold it close to him. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's a little weird, but I don't want to make him feel bad by pulling away. So I want him to feel good, so I'll let him keep holding my hand. And then he starts kissing my hand. And I'm like, oh, that's disgusting, but I really don't want to make him feel bad. So I'm just going to let it keep happening. And then he just starts French kissing my hand, slobbering all over it, putting it inside his mouth. And I do not pull my freaking hand away, because I feel so bad for the guy. And everybody on the bus is staring at me. And now like I'm like so torn between like my like weird over empathy for this guy and my total embarrassment that I'm like this freaking weirdo letting this homeless guy eat my hand, and like everybody's staring at me like, why isn't he pulling his hand away? Like, what's wrong with him? So,
oh my god, how do you de-escalate that?
I know, yeah. And then I'm like, well, now I'm like committed, so now I'm gonna look like an idiot if I do pull away.
You don't grab his hand and be like, oh. No, what did you do? You just pull it away then in the end, or?
The bus stopped and everybody got up. That was the only way it ended. It was the bus stopped and it was my stop. So, I know. It was so terrible. And then I was so confused. I went into my workplace because that's where I was taking the bus to. I worked like shipping and receiving, so I worked with all these like rough, like blue collar guys, and I'm like telling them this story, and they're like horrified, like, and so like they're shocked, like, why would you let him keep kissing your hand? Like, what was wrong with you? And I was so shocked that they saw it that way. Like, I thought they would see it like I was trying to be nice to the guy. Like, isn't that obvious? Like, wouldn't anybody do that? So anyway, so kind of like
God.
one of the things I learned from Qigong was like that I had like really weak boundaries, and like from a psychological perspective, it's just like, oh, like you have like a belief that like you need, they would always see it as like, oh, you had a parent who you always had to come to their rescue, and now you're always trying to come to everybody else's rescue, something like that. But like from a Qigong perspective, like it's all energy, so it's like literally if you have weak boundaries, your boundaries are physiologically weak. Like there's a energy field that needs to be stronger. And they don't care about your freaking stories or your past or any of that stuff. They're like, no, just make the energy field thicker, and then you'll feel like you have better boundaries. So I was like so relieved that that was the case, that was like the perspective in Qigong, because I was so tired of like thinking about my stories and everything. And so I just like committed to that practice. And it really seemed to be a real thing. Like you could really build those boundaries and really like create a sense of like being strong inside yourself and not constantly like your energy like going out and like trying to see what was going on with other people, and not just in a helpful way, but also in like the narcissistic way of like, what do other people think of me, and like, do people like me and all that stuff. Like I could really bring that energy in myself. And yeah, so Qigong's kind of weird but kind of cool, huh?
Wow, I think that story about creating your own boundaries is like the best sales pitch you could ever give to anyone to start Qigong. It's like, yeah, now a homeless man will not lick your hand and you will not accept it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do homeless people lick you? Try Qigong.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. That was amazing. And with your Qigong videos, like, I love how you've taken the best elements of your previous yoga teacher, of being in this beautiful environment. Like,
Yeah.
like your videos are really mesmerizing, the place that you go to film them.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, they are beautiful. I do recommend anyone listening to check out your YouTube videos, and I'll add a link in the description to your YouTube channel so that they can go to watch your videos. In fact, I actually got a message from someone on my YouTube channel being like, hey bro, thank you so much for your content. I've just been watching Nick Loffree's what's your bioenergetic channel?
Yeah, Nick Loffree, Bioenergetic Health.
Bioenergetic Health, yeah. And this has helped me so much with my psychosis. I've stopped hearing voices now for like 10 days. I'm doing this every day.
What?
And
Why didn't you tell me that? Why did you tell on your channel?
Right, yeah. I think I did send you the screenshot of it.
Oh, okay. I have no memory of that. But that is one of the side effects, either from all the drugs or I did have some head injuries also that led to psychosis. But I have horrible memory. I forget everything. Right. That might be from weed. I know I smoked a lot of weed in high school, so that's definitely seems like a well-established fact that messes up your memory.
Could be a part of that, yeah. Let's very quickly touch on your traumatic brain injuries, because I remember we talked about that the first time that we had a conversation. So
yeah, you
were smoking weed and then you banged your head and like fell into a bush or something like that, right?
Yeah, I had two. So both of them I was very high. The first one, just weed, and we were doing this. I don't know if you ever did this, but like you make yourself pass out by hyperventilating.
Yeah, I tried it once.
Yeah. So we did that a bunch of times, and one time we did it and my friend was supposed to like catch me, but I guess he was too weak or something, and he just kind of like let me fall and like pushed me and I hit my head on the concrete and had a seizure for about 30 seconds. And when I woke up, like I was like completely paranoid. I had no idea where I was or who I was for like a good minute or something. And but I can't remember. That might have been, I can't remember how close that was to when I started getting psychotic symptoms. I think it was a good like 8 months before I did. But the second one was actually after, I'd been going through psychosis for 6 months or something, and I had that experience with LSD and telepathy. And then like a month after that, I was doing ecstasy, and I was kind of like skipping school to do ecstasy in the woods. And it was sometime like late afternoon or something, and I'd been smoking a whole pack of cigarettes all day, and I wasn't like a regular smoker, so my brain wasn't like super used to it, I guess. But I was noticing the nicotine was making the ecstasy like feel way better, so I just kept smoking like all day, chain smoking.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Yeah. And then somebody handed me a bong, and I packed it with half tobacco, half weed, and I was sitting on a log in the woods, and I took like this huge rip off the bong, and then I passed out. I like fell off the log into a thorn bush, and I had a seizure in the thorn bush. I think it was from all the nicotine mixing with the ecstasy. But when I woke up, it was like hours later because it was pitch blackout. Like it was like late afternoon. I ripped this bong. Like it was like 5 p.m. or something, and then it was like pitch black when I woke up. So I have no idea how long I was out. But I'm like sitting on a log. I have no idea who I am or where I am. My shoulder's dislocated. I'm bleeding everywhere, and I'm just like completely delirious for like an hour. And my friends had to call the ambulance. The paramedics come through the woods with like flashlights and bring me out to the ambulance. And I'm still delirious. And they're asking me what I did. I told them I was like drunk or something. Um, and they take me to the hospital and like put my shoulder back in and everything. But I was like super, super out of it for like several hours of being like totally confused. And I think it was after that that the extreme paranoia started kicking in. And I don't remember the exact timeline, like was it the next day or the next week, but it was shortly after that that things got like extremely weird. So pretty sure that has something to do with it.
Yeah, for sure. That would support the hypothesis that, you know, the damage done to your brain may have had implication in how your psychosis was brought upon. And it could be one of the reasons why, along with the drugs, along with the trauma, why your chemical imbalance was there inside of your head.
Yeah, and it also goes with a couple other interesting theories, like what we were talking about with the serotonin. Like ecstasy is like a huge serotonin promoter.
Yeah.
So if that causes psychosis, that might have been related. And also, I saw a study a year or two ago. It was a new study on schizophrenics' brains and genetics, and it found that people with schizophrenia were way more likely to have this gene that made their brain process nicotine differently. And they found that because they were trying to find out if there's a reason that, like, I never found this, but apparently most schizophrenics find that when they smoke cigarettes, it like helps their symptoms or helps them relax or something.
I found that during my psychosis, whenever I was like going for long walks, I would be in like this deep conversation with the voices, and I would just like, we call cigarettes fags. Like I would just like smoke fag after fag after fag after fag, and just like being like wiped out on like ecstasy or something like that. Like I'd be smoking it, talking inside of my head. Next thing you know, my fag's done. And then I would just go to the next one and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And I was like, I wasn't even conscious of like how quickly and how much I was smoking, but it did really allow me to be present with communicating with the voices. And I heard that it's because nicotine, it allows your brain to focus. And so like a lot of people will take like nicotine supplements if they are like studying or going into an exam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you didn't. So it didn't diminish your symptoms. It just made you like integrate them better or something.
Yeah, become more present and aware with them. Didn't diminish the symptoms, but
Okay.
allowed, like, it did genuinely like feel like help me at the time.
Interesting.
And then it came a time where it was just like they're making me feel sick. Yeah, I got this like message from this dad once, and he was telling me how his son was 16 and he just had a drug-induced psychosis, and like the dad told me,
yeah,
that he stormed into the son's room and told him he was smoking a vape. You can't be smoking that vape, that's doing damage to you. And he like ripped it off his son and told me he wasn't allowed to smoke it ever again. And he sent those in a text message to me, and I was like, whoa man, like that's not the way you want to be treating your son whenever he's going through this traumatic time. Like, yeah, like if he finds it helps him at the time, then you know.
Yeah.
Like, don't be a dictator.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it does tie in with another one of my theories.
Oh yeah, tell us.
So I can never remember if this was Joseph Campbell or Carl Jung being quoted by Joseph Campbell. So either one of them could have originated this. But you probably know this quote. And this is kind of paraphrasing. The psychotic drowns in the same water that the mystic or the shaman swims in, right?
Yeah, I got that quote from you, and thank you so much for that because I could relate to it. It's amazing.
Yeah. So, okay. So our culture uses nicotine like just a fun thing, like nicotine fun, smoking cigarettes fun. But the cultures that really like tobacco originated in, native North and South America, right? It was a spiritual aid, right? Like it helped open their mind to like a spiritual mindset, right? And they would only use it in like ceremony. Specifically, the people who would use it the most would be the shaman, right? Does the shaman have the same genetic makeup? Like there's like, a recessive gene or something in humanity that only shows up in, 3% of the population or something that makes them prone to mystical or altered experiences, right? And that gene, maybe it relates to that nicotine processing that would make it so for the shaman, smoking that tobacco is like a spiritual experience, whereas for the normal person, tobacco's like, whatever, give me a little buzz. Like, I definitely find for myself, like if I smoked a cigarette right now, it like, I feel like my brain like opens to the heavens and like white light is like pouring into the top of my head. And it gives me a lot of anxiety, but like, I feel like it like completely blasts my mind open, and it'll actually give me some psychotic symptoms sometimes. So I really don't do it. But like normal, that's like not normal, like most people smoke a cigarette and they get a little buzz or they get a little more focused or they, it lowers their anxiety or something, and like, or it's just fun to smoke. But I do wonder if like the same like genetic precursors or something, whatever predisposes people in like ancient traditional cultures to become a shaman or a mystic or something, is the same like base material that kind of decides like who's gonna develop psychosis.
Yeah, that's an interesting theory. And also, like, in Western society, the tobacco companies put so much different chemicals inside of a cigarette. Like, isn't there like rat poison in some cigarettes and stuff like that too?
I don't know if they put it in
Wow.
the cigarette, but I imagine at least the way they grow tobacco, right, is full of pesticides and everything.
Yeah, for sure. While these indigenous cultures are using like organic, pure tobacco.
Right. They probably
The
haven't like
effects are
selectively bred it in the same ways and everything.
Yeah, for sure. So some of those impurities would have gone. Like, but during my psychosis, I was smoking Vietnamese fakes because my psychosis started in Vietnam, so I brought back a load of Vietnamese fakes, and I wonder if that helped me more than the Western fakes. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I love that quote from Joseph Campbell. It's amazing. Nick, I want to congratulate you on your wedding.
Oh,
congratulations, bro.
thanks.
Yeah.
How was the wedding?
Oh, it was magical. It was perfect because we only had 12 people there. It was up in a cabin in the mountains in the snow. We pretty much just had like extremely close family and a couple friends, and everyone else attended on Zoom because I had family in Canada that couldn't come. She had friends and family in Japan who couldn't come, and we got married in Idaho in the U.S. And but it was so nice that we could just, at the end of the ceremony, just turn off the camera, and most of the people were gone, and we didn't have to have like a big party and plan all kinds of elaborate crap. We just got married because we loved each other and weren't trying to make a big show of it, and so it was really beautiful.
Beautiful, man. I love it. Yeah, congratulations for you. I really hope the best for you and Charity.
Yeah, thanks.
Before we came on, you told me that you have a really cool story about bears.
Oh yeah, kind of ties some of the stuff together.
Yeah, does it?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, share it with us, please.
So during the summer in between my first and second part of my yoga teacher training, this was 2012, I went camping for 3 weeks with my family. And it was kind of a place like my family goes every year. And at that point, I was like 22 and I was like really sick of like going camping with my family, but I had no friends because I'd been in this like 4-year crazy relationship where I couldn't really have any friends due to some jealousy stuff. But so I'm like, okay, whatever. I'll go camping with you guys, but this is gonna be me time. I'm gonna be meditating the whole time and doing yoga, and like I'm gonna ignore like all the normal stuff. And so I go, and I'm like trying to be like, this is my Zen retreat, and so I'd wake up at like with the sunrise every morning and do like 2 hours of yoga and meditation, and go on like walking meditation hikes like all day, and at night I'd be meditating on the beach under the stars, and so it was really cool. But every night, so this is at a campground in Canada called Killbear. I don't know why it's called Killbear. Like kill bears there, but there's a lot of bears. They're all black bears, which are kind of like the friendlier bear. Like they don't usually attack people at the same rate of like grizzly bears and stuff. And they're a little smaller. But every night there was a drought that year, so there wasn't a lot of food. So the bears would be coming into the campground at night at like 2 a.m. and breaking into people's cars and stealing their coolers and stuff like that, and they were really smart. Like they knew like how to pop open a trunk. They knew how to get their claws up under a window and rip the window out in a car. So they're real crafty. So if you left like a cookie crumb on the seat of your car, the bear would smell that from a mile away and come rip out your window. And the way that I don't know if it was one bear or several bears or what, but every night a bear would walk. I guess my campsite was like at the edge of the campground next to the forest. So the bear would come from the forest and walk through my campsite specifically to get to all the other campsites every single night for 3 weeks. And so I had to wake up every night at like 2 a.m. or whatever to a bear, not just walking through my site, but its path was specifically when I'm laying in my little tiny tent, it would walk specifically right past my head, like right past the tent fabric, a foot away from my head, right? So I wake up hearing like these heavy footsteps and loud breathing right next to my head. And so every night, yeah, I'm going to bed after a whole day of like Zen yoga meditation, and I go to bed, I'm like completely anxious and paranoid, like, man, did I leave a crumb in my pocket that it's going to smell? Did I rinse all the toothpaste out of my mouth because they like to eat your toothpaste, so like, is there mint in my mouth, it's going to smell it and rip open my tent. And so I've got like a knife under my pillow, like I'm ready to like stab a bear in the face, like if it's like rips my tent open. But one night, I guess, so it's kind of the same idea as before when I'd done all that meditation. Like meditation is like a skill you build over time, and you get more results as you build that skill to a higher degree. And so after 3 weeks of like constant meditation and yoga, I'd really built that like mental focus muscle. And I'm walking home from the beach at night, and I'm kind of in like a walking meditation, which is where you kind of just the focus of your meditation is the feeling of walking, right? So it's your footsteps on the ground and your breathing and stuff. And I'm like really in like a Zen state. Like I really slowed down my breathing. I'm like super calm and focused. And in that state, I passed the campsite that the bear had kind of ransacked the night before. And my mind kind of goes to the bear, and it doesn't just go to the bear, but it goes to my story about the bear. Like, oh, the bear's dangerous. The bear's going to eat me tonight. The bear's going to break into my tent tonight. Like all this fear stories, right? But because I'm in this like extreme meditative state, instead of like thinking the thoughts, I'm watching the thoughts, right? And I'm like detached from that story now. And I'm like, oh, it's kind of a weird paranoid story. Like, is that the story I have to have about the bear? And that makes space for another story to come out, which is like empathy for the bear. Like it's scared. It's more scared of me than I am of it, most likely. That's why it comes at 2 a.m. when I can't see it, it's starving because there's a drought. It's probably so hungry, and it's scared that it's going to starve to death. And that's like just so much empathy for the bear that my heart just completely opened to it, like energetically. And it like opened a portal between me and not just that bear, but the spirit of the bear, like the archetype of the bear, or the black bear, I guess more specifically. And this is something like Native American mysticism like talks about a lot. But basically, the spirit of the bear entered me, and I became the bear. Like I had a vision of like growing like black fur all over my body, and like claws and a long snout, and like but it wasn't about seeing myself as a bear from the outside, but looking at the world through the bear's eyes. Like suddenly I could see my own life through, like, how would a bear live my life? How would a bear see my life and my circumstances? And I start like walking like the bear and breathing like the bear and feeling like the bear. I'm feeling like slow and heavy and ponderous. And this was all like opposite to my usual, which is like anxious and frenetic and like too light and too open. And now I felt like so strong and grounded and protected and calm. And I just started like looking at like the things in my life that I usually like worry about, like, oh, like there's this girl I like, and what if she doesn't like me back? And what if I miss my opportunity with her and I was supposed to be with her forever? Or what about this career? Like, am I supposed to be doing this career? And what if I didn't do the right career and 10 years down the road, I look back and I made the wrong choice? Like so much like worry about all these things I can't control. And from the bear's perspective, I just saw it. I was like, man, like it's gonna be fine. Like I'm strong. It's fine if I make the wrong choice and I just learn from it and I grow and like everything. That's another way. Like no matter what path I choose, like things are gonna be fine because I have the inner resources to meet life. And I just kept applying that to like one thing after another, like all these things I'd been anxious about. And what like the vision that went with that and what I felt was like there's this like heat in my upper abdomen, which in yoga they call like the like solar plexus chakra, right, or Manipura chakra, and they associate with the element of fire. In qigong they associate it more with earth, but it's kind of the same quality. Like this is where your digestive energy is, not just for digesting your food, but that same energy that digests your food digests your experiences and your thoughts and your emotions, and kind of like churns it out and separates the good from the bad. It helps your mind have good, clear judgment and rationality, and be kind of have equanimity, right? Like even, balanced mind, and that was completely the quality I had. And I saw it as golden light, like golden light in that area, and that golden light spread into the field around me as like an aura of golden light, and in that aura, like it was like I was as thick skinned as the bear that could walk through thorn bushes all day and never get hurt because it's got thick fur and thick skin. Like I had a thick skinned aura. I had less concern about what people thought of me. I felt strong in myself and a strong sense of personal identity. And so it was like just this crazy like download. It all happened in like 30 seconds or a minute or something. But I just thought, wow, like there's some weird power in like connecting with an animal spirit. And around that time, I was starting to learn Qigong. And it was like years later, I'm studying Qigong. And I find out that there's all these Qigong forms based on animals. And one of them was the bear form, which is a very common form in Qigong, as it turned out. And the bear is used specifically for this function of improving the like digestive power and all the kind of energetic qualities that go with it, of transforming worry into equanimity and like balance of mind and inner strength and all that stuff. And they literally imitate bears' movements through like slow meditative qigong movements to cultivate that same energy that I got in that experience. But the weirdest part was about a month after that experience, I was in British Columbia, which is the west coast of Canada, and that's where I was doing the yoga teacher training. And the teacher training was like kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So on my way home, I had to like take a bus to this tiny airport in the middle of like this forest in the middle of nowhere to connect to like a bigger airport, or whatever. But I have like this 6-hour wait until my plane comes. And so I'm like, oh, I should go for a hike on ecstasy because my friend at the yoga training gave me some ecstasy. So I'm like, I got to get rid of this before I go through security. So I take the ecstasy and I go on this hike. And bearing in mind for the audience, ecstasy is not a hallucinogen. So I did not hallucinate what came next. But I go on this hike and I'm walking through this field, and there's this like big hill in the distance with like a pine tree, like right in the highest point of the hill. And there's an eagle, bald eagle, circling over the pine tree. And it's like sunset and everything's looking all mystical. And I'm on ecstasy. And I'm like, man, I think that eagle is like calling me to the top of that hill. And so this is what's weird. So the whole thing with clocks, right? Like I thought like angels are talking, like I saw omens everywhere, right? But the other weird thing is sometimes I actually see omens, all right? And usually they're a lot more obvious and they like, anyways, that's again the thing of like, same with the telepathy thing, right? Like 99% of the time it was fake, but there was sometimes that telepathy is actually real. So this is a whole other like issue I have with modern psychology, which is like they really don't want to acknowledge that like some of the supernatural crap is like totally real, like demons and all this stuff we've like talked about. They're like 99% of the time, yes, people are paranoid or they're fake and they just want attention, or there's all kinds of ways that it's not real. But there is that little sliver of time that the supernatural really is like super real. But that's just me. Anyways, I follow this eagle to the top of this hill. To get to the top of the hill, I have to march through like thorn bushes that are up to my waist. So it's like I'm literally hiking for like 10, 15 minutes through like thick thorn bushes, and the thorn bushes are not just full of thorns, but they're full of spiders. Like literally every thorn bush for this whole 15 minutes is covered in spider webs, like huge spiders, or what seems huge in Canada, like so spiders like the size of a loonie, as we say, or a dollar coin. And I have arachnophobia. Like I'm terrified of spiders. They're like probably my biggest fear. All right. I have to walk through this, but I'm on ecstasy, so I guess I'm powering through it, And I get to the pine tree, and the underneath the pine tree is the only part of this whole entire hill that wasn't covered in thorn bushes and spiders. It had just a soft patch of green grass on it, right? And so I'm like, oh, sweet. I guess the eagle really was trying to call me here. I found the perfect place. I had a good view of the sunset and everything. And so I like relax on this hill. But I'm on ecstasy, right? And the ecstasy, there's one time it gave me like some healing experience with the psychosis, but for the most part, it just made me feel even more like flighty and like overly energetic and like leaky in my energy and everything, and like oversensitive and all this stuff that like kind of was like related to the psychosis, it felt like. And so I'm like laying on the grass and like trying to like connect with the earth and like feel more grounded or something. And as I'm doing that, I'm laying like very still, and everything's like super quiet. And in the quiet, I hear somebody walking their dog through these thorn bushes. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, who is crazy enough that out in the middle of nowhere next to this random airport, somebody's walking a dog through a hill full of thorn bushes and spiders? And it gets closer and closer. I'm like, man, that sounds like a really big dog. And finally, it's so close. I'm like, this person's going to step on me with their dog if they get any closer. And I'm wearing all green, like I have green pants, green shirt. I'm lying in green grass. I'm like, man, they must not be able to see me. They're about to step on me. And I look up, and there's the biggest black bear I've ever seen in my life. And it's literally about to step on me with its next step because it doesn't see me. And I jerk away. I'm like, oh my gosh, a black bear, I'm about to die. The black bear suddenly sees me after I jerk, and he's like, oh my gosh, a human, I'm about to die. He thinks I'm going to shoot it or something. And we both just freeze there for like a couple seconds, like staring at each other, wondering what the other one's going to do. I'm like 100% sure I'm about to get decapitated, right? But it's got it's like completely mirroring me. Like we are in the exact same state of mind. And then it breaks first, and it turns around and it runs away down the hill. And then like I'm on ecstasy, I'm all full of love. And I'm like, wait, no, now I want to be friends. Let's come back. Like you're so cute. But after that, it was like, oh my gosh, like could there be a more powerful sign that I'm supposed to pay attention to something the bear was trying to teach me? And so I didn't really know what to do with it at the time, though. All I knew was, maybe I got to work with this chakra that they talk about in yoga. But later in Qigong and Chinese medicine and nutrition, it all really came together. I realized that digestion is so much more related to mental health than I'd ever given it thought. And it's not just like your diet. Like I always thought about it like, oh, you need to eat like a special diet because that's gonna like detox like heavy metals from your brain or something like that. And that's all 100% real too. But the power of your digestion, your ability to digest your food, not just what you're eating, but how well you can digest it, right? And the energy that's going through your digestion, all of that, the bacteria that's in your digestive tract and the hormones and everything that it makes, all of that, like that is your mental health. Like that's like I realize, like for me at least, that's like most of my mental health. Like 99% of the picture of how well I feel on a given day relates to how well my digestion is doing. And done a lot of research on it. What's that?
They say there is like a second brain in your stomach, and that's why the gut brain connection is so important. I've experienced the exact same thing whenever I eat too much sugar.
Oh, really?
I'll feel like horrendous and go like into a depression.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting. Yeah. So there's a lot of mechanisms for it. The big one I found is the bacteria. Like your gut bacteria synthesize like 90% of the serotonin, which most people will say is a good thing. You need to feed your gut bacteria so they can make all that serotonin. But I'm pretty sure, based on I've done a lot of experiments on myself. There's this guy Ray Peat. That's where I got the name of my YouTube channel, Bioenergetic Health. He kind of coined the term for his like philosophy of nutrition. He's a biochemist and a biophysicist who got into nutrition on this kind of alternate theory of health that basically stems from like how well your cells are producing energy is like the basic, like that should be your barometer of health. Like if you look at what most people think of for health, like in medicine, it's like totally scattered. It's like, well, there's this vitamin and that mineral and this part of the cell and this part of the brain. And it's like there's no like priority. It's not like nothing's like aiming towards something. It's just like, well, this is all the different mechanisms of the body, and we think you're supposed to make all of them work well. You know, like that's the basic theory of medicine. But his theory is like all of those mechanisms lead towards the ability of the body to produce energy and to circulate that energy around the body between the cells. And basically all the cells are operating not just on mechanical bits working together, but on fields of energy that they're producing from the metabolism. And so making the metabolism very strong and producing it, not just producing energy, but having able to move and communicate through you is the key to health. And I got really hooked on that because that was the exact theory that Chinese medicine had come across. And it worked so well for me, but this guy had completely discovered it independently. Like he did not research Chinese medicine and then reverse engineer it from a Western perspective. He did a lot of research on like Western science, chemistry and everything, and found the same thing from a different angle. And so that made me think like, this has got to be a good idea. But anyway, so his research, because he's coming at it from a different angle, a lot of his stuff winds up being like totally converse to like normal, even alternative Western theories. So like the idea that serotonin is like this happiness chemical that's always good for you and you always want more of it is like completely crazy to him. And he actually thinks serotonin is a stress chemical. Like you can literally prove this in a lab. Like if you cut yourself and look at your blood in a microscope, like the cells that are responding to the cut, like are releasing serotonin, like as part of their stress response, right? Like stressors on the body cause serotonin release, right? And so it's like serotonin is not just something in your brain that's like a neurotransmitter, but it's all over your body. And one of the things that actually does, like that we know that it really does, because the whole theory that it causes depression or it cures depression, that's like a very theoretical concept that like only arises because, you know, we give these drugs that theoretically raise your serotonin, and then people who take them, most of the time their depression symptoms relief, but we never actually really like watch the mechanism in action, right? But one mechanism that you really can watch in action is in the cells. When there's more serotonin, the cells, when they're producing energy, that energy is electrons, right? And those electrons get trapped in the cell by serotonin. So normally those electrons want to pass between the cells and be able to share and spread and communicate and everything. But when there's more, the more serotonin there is, the more the electrons are trapped inside the cell. And that's really like, we know that's not a good thing, right? But yet we're constantly telling people, oh, you need more serotonin, you need more serotonin. But that would be causing the cells to keep their electrons, which in Chinese medicine, we call stagnant qi, right? Or qi stagnation, right? Energy stagnant. There's just, we think about it in qi, and Western medicine thinks of it as electrons, right? So qi stagnation is like one of like the worst things you can have in Chinese medicine. And they have a million different therapies for curing it. But apparently we might be like causing it with so many dietary recommendations, like, oh, have tons of tryptophan because it turns into serotonin, have lots of 5-HTP, it'll make more serotonin, have this antidepressant, it'll make more serotonin. But in Ray Peat's there, or eat lots of prebiotic fiber, like eat tons and tons of fiber because you're going to make more gut bacteria, and that bacteria is going to make more serotonin, and that's going to be good for you, right? But Ray Peat's theory is you want less serotonin, and therefore you actually want less gut bacteria, especially in the small intestine. And based on me trying his stuff, like I found like literally 100% of the time, if I do therapies that minimize the amount of gut bacteria, or if I like take experimental drugs or things that lower the amount of serotonin in my brain, it's pretty much guaranteed to make me feel better emotionally and give me better mental symptoms and everything. So,
wow, that's so interesting because it goes completely against what I've been recommended. Like I'm consistently recommended, like have more fiber in your diet, have more probiotics, prebiotics in your diet, and I'm gonna check out that guy, Ray Peat, and look up his diet because I'm feeling myself a bit of a leaky gut at the minute. I am busting for a shite, mate.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but mate, I'm gonna round this up.
Sure.
As this probably is the longest podcast ever done, and I'm fucking loving it, man. Thank you so much for sharing all this wisdom inside you. Like, it's really powerful stuff. But I always finish it with 3 quick-fire questions. All right.
Sure.
So, number 1, Nick, can you name 3 things that you are grateful for today?
Number 1 of 3 is to name 3 things. Come on, Leo.
2 is 2 and 3 is 1. So.
Okay, so that 3 things I'm grateful for today. Well, number 1, I'm super grateful for. I just moved to Okinawa, Japan 2 days ago, and it's a tropical island where the vast majority of people live to over 100 years old. So obviously they're doing something right with their diet or the air or water or something here. So very grateful to be in this very healthy environment and really enjoying it so far. Number 2, very grateful for my wife who was born and raised here. So she speaks fluent Japanese, but she was raised here by American parents. So she also speaks fluent, perfect English. And so everywhere we go, she's the perfect translator and interpreter. And it's pretty awesome. And she's also like the sweetest ever. So, and number 3, grateful for just how something that started so shitty, like psychosis and everything, turned into me having this really fun career where I get all this cool computer and camera equipment and I get to make YouTube videos out in nature. And basically I do what I wanted to do as a kid, which was I wanted to make nature documentaries when I was a kid, and now I practically do that. So it's kind of sweet, and I have a pretty cool life that came out of all this. So hopefully other people know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't always look like that.
Beautiful, man. You are truly an inspiration, having been able to recover and living such amazing, beautiful life and having a beautiful wife. Question 2 then is, can you name 2 goals that you would like to achieve? Maybe one of them can be short term, the other can be long term, or it's up to you.
Oh, I get it. We're going 3-3, 2-2, 1-1. All right.
Yeah.
2 goals. All right. Short-term goal is to get to 100,000 YouTube subscribers. I'm at like 17,500 right now.
Nice goal.
So that'd be pretty cool. Long-term goal, I really want to create an experimental mental hospital retreat center where people can come and stay for like months at a time and like actually heal their mental health problems. Like most mental hospitals is like, come like not kill yourself for a little while we watch you, or like nobody really like heals at a mental health facility for the most part. But I want to do one where people really heal, like spiritually, physically, mentally, obviously, just the whole thing, using like all the therapies, like not just one thing, but like we have like special diets, and we have acupuncturists, and we have psychiatrists there for you if you need it. And we even have play, it's like out in nature. We have like volleyball, you can go surfing, you get like you're not just there thinking about your problems all day, experiencing joy and connection and socializing. And what I also want to do is have a deal with like some kind of government where like, if there's like somebody who's like homeless and like completely bananas out of their mind, like, and I don't know, maybe they like killed somebody or something, and so they've been put in jail, and they've like, lost their rights to like choose their destiny. They get sent to us, and we like get to like stick them with vitamin IVs and stuff, and like because if somebody's like, there's so many people that they're so far gone with psychosis. Like this is really sad. I get like you probably get this all the time. Like I get parents all the time whose like kids are psychotic, or like somebody's brother. Like it's always like a family member reaching out to me about the psychotic person, like most of the time. And I have such a hard time helping them because my first question is always, well, does the person even know they're psychotic, or do they just believe that their delusions are real? right? And most of the time, they just completely believe it. Like they don't know they're psychotic. Like you can tell them they're psychotic, they don't believe you. They just think the FBI is really watching them or whatever it is, you know. Um, so it's so sad because you like the things that I want to recommend people do, you have to do for yourself. Like you have to want to get better to do qigong or change your diet. Like you wouldn't think changing your diet is going to make the FBI stop spying on you, right? So like how are you going to motivate them to change their diet, you know? So that's why
Completely,
I
yeah.
think it would be really cool to somehow like if you know what's really sad is the law will only allow someone to be forced into treatment if they have like attempted suicide or like done violence to another person. Then the law can be like, okay, now we're forcing this person into a mental institution, right? And I get that the other way is really messed up too, because like the idea of like who's crazy is like a really subjective idea. So to be like, oh, like let's let the government decide who's crazy and who's forced into institutions, you know, like that's kind of that's a really thin line you don't want to cross either, you know. But there is like some point where like obviously someone's crazy and needs help and is never in a million years going to seek it for themselves, and it's at some point it's immoral not to make them get help, you know, like at some point like you're the irresponsible one for not just forcing it upon them. um
Yeah.
I don't
Completely.
know where that line is, but it was my dream for this center is that if whatever like measurement that is for that line, once somebody's crossed it, somehow they can be sent to our center, and it's like a little bit of like a therapeutic jail where like the only food they're offered is food that will be helpful and healing to them. The environment
Yes.
they're in is helpful and healing to them. You know, like
Yes.
we just get that, like even if it's not perfect, like we get them well enough that they start to realize that they're getting better and that they want to continue getting better, and then they want to be an active participant in their healing, and then they can fully heal from that point. But that's a long way off. Might have to do it in like Ecuador or some like country with like less laws around that.
Bro, like you're not gonna believe this, but I have the exact same goal in mind. And
No way.
I am
Well, maybe we'll do it together
objectively
then.
yeah, man, let's reconnect. I'm objectively focusing on trying to achieve that within 5 years. And
Within
my
5
goal
years,
at the
okay.
minute.
is literally just to get enough money in order to start this project.
Well,
So
shit.
yeah, man.
We are gonna connect about that and we are going to help create it. Let's do it,
Okay,
man.
yeah,
That's
let's do it.
amazing.
Sounds awesome.
Wow.
It's actually astonishing. Like you just pretty much repeated every single plan that I have for that.
Like
Wow.
it's
Like the whole vision is exactly the same. It's kind of insane.
Yeah, it's because it needs to happen. So it's in the ethers. It's
yeah,
waiting to happen.
completely.
Yeah, it's in the unconscious. And Nick, the final question before I shit myself
Is
name one person you'd like to let them know that name one person you'd like to let them know that you love them.
Well, I have no idea who's going to be watching this, but
They don't have to be watching it.
oh, okay. I guess my mom. She was probably my biggest help and support through everything. Started into yoga because she got me into it, and started into fitness because she got me into it, and yeah, she was really there for me, and I just really appreciate her.
Thank you, Mom. What a beautiful lady. Amazing. Wow. Nick, thank you so much. This has been such an incredible interview. I've loved talking to you, mate. And I would love to talk to you for longer, but I'm very wary of time. So we're going to round it up. Thank you, bro.